I'd like to welcome everybody to tonight's Town Council meeting here in the Council Chambers. It is December 8th, 2014, and we have called the meeting to order at 7 o'clock here tonight. We will open with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, and indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Councilor Carrasco?
Present.
Councilor Clemens?
Present.
Councilor Estrada?
Present.
Councilor Manna?
Present.
Councilor Moriarty?
Present.
Councilor Peloquin?
Present.
Councilor Steves?
Present.
Councilor Vandal?
Present.
Councilor Vecchia?
Present.
9 here.
Thank you. Agenda item number 3 is to consider and accept the Town Council meeting minutes of Monday, November 17th, 2014.
So moved. Second.
Any corrections, additions, amendments? Seeing none, a simple hand vote is fine. All those in favor? Unanimous. Thank you. Agenda item number 4 is subcommittee reports. The first one is General Government. Councilor Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I actually have like 6 pages of general government meeting minutes, but I'm not going to bore you with all of them. They're from Wednesday, November 12th, in which we discussed the partnership between the town and Borrego Solar Systems. And the second one is on Monday, November 17th, in which we discussed the appropriation of $27,000 from the landfill reimbursement fund. Those are on record here at the office. If you would like a full copy and read them, hopefully they'll also be online at some point soon. I'm not going to bother. We've already addressed all these issues, and so we will put those aside, and I will read the minutes from Monday, December 1st. Meeting of the General Government Subcommittee was held Monday, December 1st in the George Parent Community Room, second floor of the Town Hall. I was there along with Councilor Conrad Vandal, Councilor Steves, Citizens Member Holly Christo, and Citizens Member Mike James. Acting Town Manager Kevin Pecos and Councilor Peloquin was excused. We called the meeting to order at 6 o'clock. And there was one agenda item to vote to authorize the demolition of buildings revolving fund under the provisions of Mass General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 53E1/2, to pay expenses associated with the demolition of buildings within the town of Southbridge and any revenue recaptured to be deposited in the account, with all expenditures approved by the town manager and total expenditures from the account not to exceed $176,000. Citizens Member Mike James made the motion, and Holly Christo seconded. Mr. Pecos explained this was straightforward. The council has adopted a goal to take down some of the abandoned, eyesore, and blighted buildings, and there is a, quote, hit list. There is a variety of revenue that the town can use, as well as block grant money, private money. On the priority hit list, the first building was 133 West Street. Some of the others listed are 2 buildings on Cohasset Street with fire damage, the metal structure behind the Domino's Pizza, 10 Wardwell Court, and the building on the corner of Mill Street and 131. Mr. Pecos said there are currently 140-plus buildings that are in some degree of blight. Councilor Vandal and myself both mentioned the building on Worcester Street. Mr. Pecos explained that the buildings being placed on the priority list are buildings that the council has received complaints about, and the buildings that are at the entrance to the town that contribute to the eyesore nature of the community. The 2 buildings on Cohasset Street have in excess of 30% loss of value due to the fire, and by law they cannot be rebuilt. We are out of money right now because we've only appropriated $50,000 in this year's budget, and most of that went to the 133 West Street building. What is left is not enough to take down anything, and while we're waiting to get the money back from the owners of 133 West, we're looking at other sources of money. The owners of the Cohasset Street building said they would work with us and take the buildings down at their own expense, and the town still has to go through the condemnation process, but we can get 2 buildings taken down at no expense to the town. The building at 131 in Mill and the metal structures are probably the 2 most how come I can't talk tonight? Doesn't matter. The ones that need to come down the most to meet council priorities right now. Wardwell Court is on the target zone, and CDBG money could be used to take it down, and it's being repetitioned right now. Also, there is $90,000 appropriated right now to repair the wall behind the library. If we could get the Wardwell Court building and a building on Foster Street that is for sale right next to it, we wouldn't have to repair the wall. It could be removed at a much lesser cost. The library driveway could be sloped down to improve the parking, and the town would have more land for any potential future library expansions. See, Mr. Pecos mentioned that the library has substantial assets right now that are earmarked for anything, and he asked the library board if they'd be willing to contribute some of the funds, and they're showing a lot of interest. Mr. Pecos mentioned it's a revolving fund, so when council wants to assign money for the purpose of tearing down buildings, the money will go into this account. When a building gets torn down, a lien is placed on the property at 16% interest. Typically, we get paid very quickly because people don't want to pay that interest. When the money comes back to the town, it will go into this account, and there will be money available to tear another building down. Hopefully, between new money being procreated as part of the budgeting process and the lien money coming back, that we can keep the fund at $176,000. It's limited and cannot be any more than 1% of the tax levy. That money is probably enough to do 3, 4, or 5 buildings a year. It all depends on the amount of work necessary to take a house down. The steel structure isn't a building per se, and Nick is going through a condemnation process on that structure. There is a limit as to what the law will allow. Condemnation law speaks about habitable structures being below code, and this doesn't fall into that category, but we'll go ahead with the process, and we don't think the owner will dispute it. Mr. Pecos said there are 4 or 5 buildings right now that are going through a condemnation process. Once a building is condemned, it cannot be repaired. Mr. Janes asked if we're creating this account but not putting money into it. Mr. Pecos said that when 133 West Street is redeemed, it will automatically go into that fund. Mr. Janes asked where the money is coming from now, and he said that the council appropriates money every year in the operating budget, and if that money is not spent at the end of the fiscal year, it's put back to free cash and it doesn't replicate. He said that this fund under the statute has to be reappointed each year by council. The fund has to be reauthorized at the end of every year. I said that the council should be somewhat involved in which buildings come down. There needs to be some disclosure of the determinations of which buildings come down and how the money is spent. I asked for a vote to send the demolition of buildings fund as it is listed to council with a favorable recommendation. There was a vote by show of hands, and everyone was in favor. It was 4-0, and the motion passed. Citizens member Christo made a motion to adjourn, seconded by Mike Janes, and we adjourned the meeting at 7 o'clock. Respectfully submitted, Justine French, recording clerk. And that's all we have, and no meeting scheduled at this point.
Thank you. B, DPW, Councilor Vandal.
No meeting, no meeting, and no report, no meeting scheduled. Thank you.
Thank you. C, Education and Human Services, Councilor Peliquin.
I have no minutes, but I have a meeting scheduled for Wednesday, December 10th this week at 7 p.m. in the George Parent Room on the 2nd floor.
Okay, thank you. Planning and Development, Councilor Manna.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. A meeting of the Planning and Development Subcommittee was held on Thursday, November 20th, 2014, in the George Parent Conference Room. In attendance were myself, subcommittee members Councilor Steves, Councilor Estrada, and citizen members Evelyn Petrelli and Wallace McKenzie. Also in attendance were Councilor Moriarty, Town Manager Pecos, Rose Cournoyer, and Juan Gomez. I called the meeting to order at 6 p.m. A request was made by Rose Cournoyer to change the order of the agenda items to start with agenda item number 3, 4, and 5, then 1, 2, and 6. A motion was made by Councilor Steves and seconded by Evelyn Petrelli to accept the agenda order changes. Vote by show of hands, 4-0. Councilor Estrada was absent for the vote. Agenda item number 1, review and vote to recommend the acceptance of Our Common Backyards grant in the amount of $131,600 from the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs and submit to council for ratification. This item was the splash pad grant which the governor wanted all towns to have. Mr. Pecos said it was turned down by the council, but he received a call from the Executive Office asking us to reconsider the decision. After some negotiations, a grant was given to Southbridge for $131,600 for accessible handicap parking repairs in a small playground at the West Street Fields and Park. Councilor Manna asked what funds were going to be used for the town's contribution portion. Mr. Pecos said there is no actual money contributed by the town. The matching contribution would be work done in kind. A motion was made by Councilor Steves and seconded by Councilor McKenzie with a favorable recommendation to council to accept Our Common Backyards grant in the amount of $131,600 from the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs. Vote by a show of hands, all in favor, 5-0. Agenda item number 2, vote to recommend the appropriation of 100% of the total Lower West Street Fields and Park project in the amount of $131,600 and
to submit for council for ratification. This item is part of the previous discussion. A motion was made by Mrs. Petrelli and seconded by Councilor Estrada with a favorable recommendation to council to accept the appropriation of 100% of the total Lower West Street Fields and Park project in the amount of $131,600. Vote by show of hands. All in favor, 5-0. Agenda item number 3, vote to recommend sending a statement regarding the dedication of the Lower West Street Fields and Park for park and recreation purposes according to the wishes of the landowner and submit to council for ratification. The letter would be sent to the state. A friendly amendment was made to the above agenda item. A motion was made by Mr. McKenzie and seconded by Councilor Estrada with a favorable recommendation to council to send a statement regarding the dedication of the Lower West Street Fields and Parks for park and recreation purposes according to the wishes of the landowner under Mass General Laws, Chapter 45, Section 3. Vote by show of hands. All in favor, 5-0. Agenda item number 4, review and the proposed mission and suggested activities for the Southbridge Master Plan Implementation Committee. Mr. Pecos said we have the master plan and the committee has asked the council to review the plan goals and strategies and offer any suggestions. Mr. Pecos said he does not believe this item needs to go to council at this time. It should go to the planning board. Agenda item number 5. Review the vote to recommend the components for FY 2015 Community Development Block Grant application, including a request for proposal for social services support youth and submit to council for ratification. Mr. Pecos said this is a continuation of past CDBG programs with goals and objectives set by the council. They are looking at all grants available to see where the funds can be used. Mr. Pecos discussed the different components of the proposed CDBG grant application. Much discussion was held on the social services for youth section. The concept is to have programs for youth aside from sports. The business incubator is a program to rehab a building, bring small businesses in, and hopefully as they grow, move them to a bigger location in town or have them take over the current building and move the incubator program to another building. This would make the locations into taxable properties and job-producing businesses. Mr. Pecos suggested that a meeting be called to put together a list of programs, plans with priorities in the event that more money becomes available. Juan Gomez from Central Las Americas asked that more funds be invested in social services as the demographics of the town warrants more funds be dedicated to social services. He said there are many grants available and he commits himself to helping in any way possible. A motion was made by Councilor Steves and seconded by Councilor Estrada with a favorable recommendation to council to accept the proposed FY 2015 CDBG grant components with funds subject to later council approval. Vote by show of hands. All in favor, 5-0. Agenda item number 6, review the new 1 through 11 Central Street project. Mrs. Ackley said they have received the signed contract and will be going out to bid January 2015. A motion to adjourn was made by Councilor Steves and seconded by Mr. McKenzie. Vote by show of hands. All in favor, 5-0. I adjourn the meeting at 8:10. Respectfully submitted, Evelyn Rivera, recording clerk. Mr. Chair, I do have another meeting scheduled for Thursday, December 10th at 6 p.m. in the George Parent Conference Room, and this is to go, I'm sorry?
The 10th is Wednesday.
Oh, I'm sorry, December 11th. December 11th at 6 p.m. in the George Parent Conference Room, and this is to review again the CDBG block grant application. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to E, protection of persons and property. Councilor Carrasco.
Yes, Mr. Chair, through you, a meeting of the Protection of Persons and Property Subcommittee was held on Wednesday, November 19th in the George Parent Conference Room. In attendance were myself, Councilor Vecchia, citizen member Jack Jovan, and also in attendance were Councilor Steves, Councilor Estrada, Fire Chief DeFranzo, Police Chief Charette, and Heather Bakley. Councilor Manna and citizen member Gary Fursier were excused. I call the meeting to order at 6 p.m. Agenda item number 1, vote to recommend accepting parking regulations in accordance with the provisions of Chapter 85, Section 2 of the MGL, that a permit be issued for a no parking zone on the easterly and northerly side of Mill Street as described in permit number P-00138A and submit to council for ratification. Ms. Blakely said permit number P-00138A changes permit number P-00138, which modifies 50 feet of the current zone by shortening it to help with parking in the area. Motion was made by Jack Jovan and seconded by Councilor Vecchia with a favorable recommendation to council to accept agenda item number 1 as written. Vote by show of hands. All in favor, 3-0. Agenda item number 2, discuss draft policy regarding the following use of the Everbridge activation system, parentheses, reverse 911. Chief DeFranco said that he drafted something based on other systems in the surrounding community. Chief DeFranco said trainings have been offered, but not many citizens have taken advantage of. Mr. Jovan suggested that it be put on cable access so the citizens can also opt in. Chief DeFranco said this policy is a draft and can be used in any way the council wishes. A couple of minor suggestions were made, parentheses, remove BOH and add EMD, close parentheses. It was further suggested that the system only be used for extreme emergency situations with the fire, police, and DPW departments having access to the system. The cost of the system is $6,000 per year, and the first year was covered by a grant. A motion was made by Jack Jovan and is seconded by Councilor Vecchia with a favorable recommendation to council to accept the policy for the Everbridge activation system, parentheses, reverse 911. Vote by a show of hands. All in favor, 3-0. Agenda item number 3, to this, which was an update on the Fire Station Building Committee. Chief DeFranco said that he contacted the original members of the Fire Station Committee, and only 2 members are still interested in being the committee. The original committee consisted of 7 members. By adding the fire chief and the building official, it would leave 3 vacant seats which need to be filled. The purpose of this committee is to review the past information and look into new options and information. Other, Chief Charette said that they have lost 2 officers due to health benefits and educational benefits. 1 officer who was leaving has decided to stay. Chief Charette will bring information to a future PPP meeting. Other, Mr. Jovan asked for an update on the fire department policy and procedures and an update on our EMS. Motion to adjourn was made by Jack Jovan and seconded by Councilor Vecchia. Vote by a show of hands. All in favor, 3-0. Meeting was adjourned at 6:55 p.m. Respectfully submitted, Evelyn Rivera, returning clerk. That's all I have. No meeting scheduled.
Thank you.
Excuse me. I have a question, Mr. Chair, through you. I know what the acronym for BOH is, Board of Health, but I don't know what the acronym for EMD is. Could somebody clarify that?
Emergency Medical Director.
Emergency Medical,
Emergency Management Director,
Emergency Management Director.
which is also Fire Chief DeFranco.
Okay, thank you very much. That was it.
All set? Okay. Moving on to the Town Manager Search Committee, Councilor Carrasco.
Yes, we have a meeting scheduled for this Thursday at December 11th at 5 p.m. in the George Parent Conference Room. And I'm just going to read the agenda item, so everybody understands where we're at. Vote to continue. Agenda item number 1 is vote to continue Town Manager Search as currently constituted. Agenda item number 2, vote to indefinitely postpone the Town Manager Search. Agenda item number 3, vote to enter into executive session to discuss the contract terms and liability with current search firm and to adjourn. So again, we have a meeting Thursday, December 11th at 5 p.m. in the George Parent Conference Room.
All right. Moving on to 5 chairman's announcements. I have just a few. The first of which, we have by charter every 5 years, we are charged with putting together a charter review committee. The last one was completed in 2009, which means by simple math that we are due for one here again in 2014. So with that, we are basically looking for 5 different residents to come forward to serve on this committee, the Charter Review Committee. We would have these 5, hopefully by year's end, in order to comply. If you are interested in doing so, please contact the town manager's office, and you can fill out a request form there, a citizen request form, to be on that committee. The idea is that this committee would look at the current charter, review it over a course of several months, make any sort of recommendations that they feel would be better to improve that charter, and then it would come up for council and so forth. So if you are interested, by all means, please contact the town manager's office and fill in that committee request form so we can take care of that. It's been a couple weeks, but we haven't had a meeting since then. I just wanted to thank those who made that inaugural Big Old Turkey Bowl quite a success. There were nearly 70 toys that were donated to the Toys for Tots program, which was a very nice turnout. I know that Mr. Sotilli had trouble gathering all those toys because there were so many and so large. In addition to that, there was a truck full of food that had been donated to Food Share for both the Southbridge and Webster food pantries. So that, too, was great, as well as money that had been raised, several $100s that had been raised through various attempts there and donations. So I want to thank, in particular, the numerous volunteers who helped sell some T-shirts, 50/50 tickets, the concessions, refereed the game, handling the field markers, working the PA system, working the scoreboard, cable access for filming the event on a chilly night. And also thank you to the Webster Selectmen Chairman, Bob Miller, and the town administrator out there, John McAuliffe, as well as their players and their folks from coming out and playing here at McMahon Field. But more importantly, I suppose, thank you to those who played for Southbridge in the 40-31 victory. Always nice to get that win. And those who played, the town manager, Mr. Pecos, had played, and somehow maneuvered his way into some sort of MVP vote. I don't think anybody understood that.
He used his hands.
I'm shocked that he didn't drop it. Also, Town Council Vice Chairman Carrasco, Town Councilors Estrada, Peliquin, and Steves, school committee members Jill Congdon, Chris Olivo, as well as his son Chris, Dr. Ray Page, and Aaron Quinney, who, in my opinion, probably should have won that MVP. But that's neither here nor there, as well as the Southbridge Middle High School principal, Melissa Earls, and the assistant principal, Anthony Cacase, as well as Deputy Police Chief Shane Woodson, Lieutenant Jose Dingy, and Detective Robbie Salisbury, for all coming out and playing and putting out what was really a nice time, a good effort. There were probably 100 or so people that were in attendance, and it was really a nice event. I also want to say kudos to those involved in putting together the annual Festival of Giving Trees, which was held over the weekend, 4-day event over at LaSalle Hall, outside of the old Notre Dame Church, the Blessed St. Paul, the Blessed St. John Paul II Parish, still Notre Dame to me. And this is one of those really nice community events, not just for Southbridge, but for the area. Very inclusive and just a really positive, great event that goes on with a lot of great volunteers who put in a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of resources go into that. And there were 50, 60 some odd trees there. It was really remarkable. And lastly, just a couple notes. One, pursuant to the last council meeting, at the end of the meeting, we talked about school issues a little bit, and I've talked to the school committee chairwoman. We are planning to have, at some point, a joint meeting between the council and the school committee in late January. No date has been set, but that seems to be kind of the time frame. Primarily, the hope is to really kind of start talking budgetary process at that point as well, because that is going to obviously be a big part of the budget. It's half that budget that we have. So if any councilors have a scheduling conflict in that latter half of January, please, by all means, let us know so we can try to work around those dates. If you have potential discussion items that you would like to see on that agenda, you can forward that as well. In the meantime, however, the school committee chairman has noted that if anybody does have any questions that they would like addressed before then, that she would be more than happy to address that. If you just submit that in writing, she'll give it back to you in writing, which works out nicely in terms of just having accountability. That way it's not a he said, she said, and, oh, I thought you meant that sort of thing. And lastly, more so just for the public, just a reminder that now that we are in December and it's snow season, that when the snow does start flying, that we need to clear off the sidewalks and be sure to clear access to public walkways and crosswalks. Some people, I don't think, necessarily realize or know that if you have a corner lot where you have a crosswalk or something to that effect, you're really supposed to be clearing that out as well. I believe it's 36 inches is what you're really supposed to try and clear out to help those with disabilities, wheelchairs, and so forth. And just that there are some frequent violators of the snow removal bylaw, and I'll be asking the town manager to try and ensure that these individuals, as well as all the individuals in town, all these different properties, abide by those bylaws and take care of that, because it can be a problem. It's definitely a safety problem, not just for your local mailman who's coming up and down, but especially downtown Main Street, things like that. We have a lot of people who walk to and from work, to and from home, and to and from the store. So that would be greatly appreciated for your local folks, as well as just a reminder, too, that we have alternate side parking is already in effect at this point. So based on the calendar date, is determining which side of the street you're parking on. It's quite a lengthy list, so if you're not sure if your street is on that list, by all means, contact the police department at their business line, obviously not 911, or contact the manager's office. And with that, I will hand it over to the town manager for town manager's announcements.
Just two announcements, Mr. Chairman, members of the council. First, following up on the big old turkey bowl. In a moment of spectacular weakness and obviously great charity, the committee did give me the Most Valuable Player award that night, and I know it had nothing to do with actual football competence. So my family was very excited because in my entire life, that is the singular sports award I've ever received. So with trembling hands, I plan to bring it out later, put it right up here so it can be given back to the town through the chair, so it can rest comfortably in the town's trophy case downstairs, where hopefully it will be followed by many, many other big old turkey bowl trophies in future years. I had an absolute wonderful time that night. My family did too, and it was inspirational watching the great play of the counselors that were out there on the field. So I'm happy to do my little part. Second thing, the annual Mass Municipal Association business meeting is taking place on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, January 23rd, 24th, 25th this year in Boston. The lunch meeting on Saturday is put on by the Mass Interlocal Insurance Association, which provides the town all of its health, property casualty, and comp insurance. So we are members, and we are entitled to have 6 people attend that lunch meeting, and someone needs to be the voting delegate to, that's the meeting at which they vote the new board of directors and some other votes. So I have to send this in to reserve our place, and if any councilors know they're going to be there, if you'd please let me know tonight at the conclusion of the meeting, or tell me now. I will put your name down here. I will be planning to attend, of course, and I'll get your name and get you registered, and then it's just a matter of picking up your admission. It is a closed lunch meeting, so not everybody can go in, so you've got to be pre-registered, and then you can pick it up when you're there. So please let me know tonight, and I will put your name down here, but it will go in the morning, okay? Thanks. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Moving on, we're going to take the next 2 items in reverse order in order to try and prevent some disjointment between the presentation by the Board of Assessors and then the actual votes that would follow. So to do that, we are going to swap the swearing-in presentations with the citizens' forum agenda items. So at this time, if there are any resident citizens here that would like to come forward to speak on something that is not on tonight's agenda, now would be your opportunity to do so.
Hello, my name is John Pulaski, 3 Jennison Street. Ladies and gentlemen of the council, I don't like what happened last week, or last meeting, where I was being told from this dais that the information I was providing regarding half of the landfills in this state closing by the end of 2015 being inaccurate. I also don't like at the meeting beforehand where we were told that the so-called comparison study was routine. We've all heard the phrase, once in a blue moon. We got a blue moon every 13 months. This comparison study is going to be done once in 13 years. We were also told that we'd have another chance in another 7 years, another 14 years, another 21 years. But according to the Department of Environmental Protection, the landfill isn't going to survive another 7 years. So actually, this is our only chance to get more money. Now, why am I upset about this? We were promised that they would never expand that landfill, and as some of you know, last year, we had a representative from the landfill tenant telling us that was part of the deal, that we would be expanding that landfill. And as the town manager correctly said last week, or last meeting, this study isn't about the expansion of the landfill. This study is a comparison. Now, the week before I was corrected, when I came up here, the first meeting which this was discussed, when I expressed the concern that you were only going to be studying municipal landfills. No, 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 I was told. There's going to be a number of landfills. Then last week, I was told even that the inverse was true, that it was only going to be landfills owned by municipalities and managed by other companies. Ladies and gentlemen, after 2015, and I'm going to give you all the data here, if I may, can I give it to Councilor Stevenson? There's only one other landfill in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, besides the one in Southbridge, after the year 2014, that is owned by a municipality and managed by a company. $27,000 is a lot of money. I probably spent 8 to 9 hours since the last meeting, not only in this state, getting a feel from around the, over the border in Connecticut, because that's where a lot of our waste comes from, or will be coming from. I'm here to beg you to rescind the vote of last week that may very well lock us in to the lower prices. I haven't double-checked, I've got to give deference to the town manager. He's got a lot more experience in municipal government than I do, because I don't have any. So I thought perhaps when he said that if the price of landfills were going to go up in 2 years, they'd be going up already. Well, call around yourself. I don't in any way, shape, or form, I like Mr. Pecos. And by the way, I've been remiss in not thanking whoever it is. I suspect it was probably Mr. Pecos' leadership that finally got that sidewalk fixed or put in between Big Y and the village. Arguably our most concentrated place of tenants and our most concentrated place of business. That was been an accident waiting to happen for 4 years. I've been coming up here. Others have been coming up here asking. It's been done. Mr. Pecos is a get-it-done guy, and I suspect someone gave him some bad information. And we all know that we've been getting bad information for 7 years, on and off. For example, being told if that landfill's filled, we're going to get over $100 million. I dare to say it's now 5/6 or 6/7 filled, and I don't think we've gotten $22 million. So when you have a player who has been reluctant to be consistent with their promises, notice I didn't call them liars, perhaps we should be a little more careful in locking in. This is our only chance
Yep, Mr. Pulaski, you're at your 5 minutes.
Okay.
Would you like,
I respectfully request another 5 minutes, and I may take less.
it would be for an additional 2, but, yeah.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? Okay, go ahead.
No, thank you. We have a chance here. No, nobody has ever heard me say, I want to close that landfill. Ever. I've wanted to save that landfill, because I still insist for every dollar we get, it's going to cost us $2 to $5 in the future when we have to put it somewhere else. If we came up about money 7 years ago, I don't think the particular deal that was made was made. So a lot of people have come up to me. I've been called a hypocrite in the last week by a few people because, oh, you wanted to close the landfill, now you want more money. Well, I didn't want to close the landfill. My biggest gripe wasn't garbage, it was contaminated soil. And it was extremely confusing to people last week because I'm up here complaining about the coal bottom ash, where at least outside of Southbridge, everywhere else on the planet Earth, it's a very toxic material. And then I'm coming up here talking about the money. So I can see why people think I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth. But I'm not here because it's a popularity contest. This is my hometown. I was away for 27 years. I came back for 6 months, 6 years ago, or 7 years ago, and I'm still here. Because this is very important. I've seen this ruin other communities. And I found out by an accident when I was stuck in a hotel in Ireland that in the Republic of Ireland and throughout Europe, anybody living within 2 kilometers of a landfill, their house got purchased because of the tendency, especially people with compromised livers, and for some reasons a lot of people in Ireland with compromised livers, it caused, especially in Ireland, a lot of bladder cancer and stomach cancer. Now, I'm not saying everyone's going to get cancer. Fortunately, the number's probably I shouldn't say fortunately, probably under the dozens, and I'm sorry, I go all over the place. I also have just the most recent report. I bet you very few of you have this. It's the most recent report from Ty and Bond. I wanted to get it together tonight. I was unable to. www.southbridge.info. I will have this up within 48 hours, and also the document I just shared with the council. These are the last monitoring wells. This is the stuff they say would never, ever leave the landfill. But it exceeds in arsenic, sulfate, total dissolved solids, iron, that doesn't concern me as much, manganese, sodium, that's true of every landfill, I think, dichlorobenzene, and dioxane. You know, I'm not saying the Board of Health isn't doing their job, but, you know, in other states, they close landfills for this stuff. For example, the state of New Hampshire, the state of Maine. In fact, our good friends that manage our landfill lost...
Mr. Pulaski?
Yes.
Yep. So that
Okay, well, I made my point.
Expired.
If there's any way, and also that last, hate to be picky, but that last vote wasn't even on the agenda, and perhaps there's a reason right there where you can legally rescind it. I know there was discussion in the previous meeting, but I want to thank you for the time, and if I don't see you before the holidays, have a great Christmas. Thank you for serving your town, but let's protect the people we love. Thank you.
Are there any other residents who would like to come forward at this time? Going once, twice? Okay. Move on to what is now basically been agenda item number 8, swearing-in presentations. We have an overview by the Board of Assessors on the tax classification and the tax rate. And to do so, we have Mr. Wil Cournoyer, our principal assessor.
Good evening. Bear with me just a moment while I hook up the laptop. One of my fellow assessors, Kara Donovan, is going to pass out a printout of the presentation we make tonight. So it'll just take a moment.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Karen. Thanks.
Okay, good. That part was successful. It's now up on the projector. So again, good evening, Chairman Moriarty, members of the Town Council, and the citizens of Southbridge. I'm Wil Cournoyer. I'm Chairman of the Board of Assessors and the Principal Assessor. Tonight we'll be discussing the tax rate and the classification factor for fiscal year 2015. On behalf of the other members of the board, Fran Biscay and Cara Donovan, we'd like to present the following information. I would also like to thank them all for all of the years they have put in on the Board of Assessors. As you can see on the slide, I've been doing this a long time, but Cara, very similar, 1994, and Fran Biscay, 1992, all the way up to the present. That's a lot of experience on this board. So, again, you've already received this detailed information in your packets. This slideshow, this PowerPoint presentation kind of makes it a forgive me. It's for the public mainly. You've already got a lot of this information, but it's so they'll understand the process. And please indulge me for about a minute here. I'm going to apologize in advance, and my wife is probably cringing right now, but every year at this time, it brings me back to the class of 1976 at Southbridge High School. There were 4 or 5 of us who had December birthdays, and way back then, you were the babies of your class. Nowadays, you'd be in the following class, and you'd be the oldest one in your class. We were the babies. One of my very good friends, it's his birthday today, Stu Kerboy, and I want to wish him a happy birthday, and some of the others who were in that class. Brian Iozzo, a local businessman, he was the youngest of our class. Dan Charette, our chief of police, he's a little younger, and I'm somewhere in the middle, I'm not going to say where. Since I got this idea, and again, I apologize, but I'm kind of leading to something at the end here, which I think is important. I'd also like to wish a happy birthday to Cara Donovan's mother, whose birthday is tomorrow. And particularly, we have a resident in Southbridge who I've dealt with for a number of years. He's got a birthday coming up on Christmas Day, and I've been in touch with his family, and so has part of the council, and I know you guys are going to do something, but I really want to wish this gentleman a happy birthday. One of our local townspeople is going to be 100 years old on Christmas Day, and I think that's extraordinary, and I want to wish him, from me, a happy birthday. And lastly, I'm going to outdo that one, because right around Christmas time, my mother-in-law, Gloria, who's visiting us from New Hampshire, she is at home watching her first ever town council meeting, so that must be exciting. And she is going to be having her birthday at the end of December, right around Christmas. And I think the age doesn't exceed Chris by a long shot, but it's very, very important. So happy birthday, Gloria. So thank you for your indulgence. Okay, so the purpose of classification and the options. Mass General Law allows a shift in the tax burden between classes. This does not change the total tax levy for the town. It simply determines the share to be borne by each. And there are going to be some votes required following this presentation on classification in regards to the tax rate. And I'll be passing around a sheet of paper which the state requires, which just simply attests that you were provided information on classification and votes were taken on the various options. What classification does not do? It does not determine the tax rate for the town of Southbridge. We'll go over all the points in detail, but the tax rate is determined simply by the tax levy divided by the town value. It's basic math. Classification does not determine how much money can be raised. Proposition 2.5 in Mass General Law determines that. Classification does not determine how much money will be raised. All the voted upon appropriations during the year by this body and all of the other revenue sources will determine how much money will be raised. Topics of discussion tonight, we're going to talk about the new growth of the town, our property values and the taxable town value, what the tax levy and the tax rate is, our levy limit, excess levy capacity, the various classification factors. We're going to give some examples of a tax shift, and tax-wise, how do we compare to our surrounding communities. So new growth, what is it? Well, basically, it's new construction, new buildings, additions, renovations, new subdivisions, condo conversions, businesses, factories, business equipment. How does it affect our property taxes? It brings in additional tax dollars attributable to the new construction and lessens the effect to current taxpayers. How does it affect the levy limit? It increases the amount of property tax that can be raised under the constraints of Prop 2.5. So as you can see by this slide, there was $11,920,000 in total new growth value, which will bring in an additional $934,000. Forgive me, I'm going to round on these, there's a lot of numbers, in property tax with minimal effect to the existing taxpayers. So, give me one sec. So as you can see, 26% of the new growth came from the residential class. That means the majority of it came, the remainder and the majority came from commercial, industrial, and personal property. Personal property, by the way, is another word for business equipment. It's a little misleading, but okay. So this slide kind of depicts, the percentage of the residential and the remaining classes as well. The total taxable value for the town, as you can see here, the total value this year is $904,791,000, which is an increase, finally, of $6,626,000 from last year. The last several years have seen a contraction of the town value. This year, it's actually shifted the other way, which is a great thing. So last year, the residential class bore 77.5% of the total tax burden. This year, that's been reduced, and they're only going to bear 76.4%. Here's another graphic depiction of it. As you can see, the residential bears the majority of the tax burden. Okay, this slide right here summarizes the shift over the last 7 years from the residential class picking up the highest proportion of our tax levy, and that has been shifting downward over the last 8 years, to the point now where the residential class is only bearing 76.4% of the burden. Unfortunately, this slide goes back to 2007. Further back, the opposite was in effect when residential values were appreciating so much due to the real estate market. Recertification and interim year adjustments, revaluation, recertification. Every year we have to redo our values based on fair market value. Revaluation is every 3 years where the state comes in and pulls every number through all kinds of analysis, and they really put us through the ringer every 3 years, but it gets the values right. In the interim years, we have to do the same thing, but the state does not come in and recertify us. We do it on our own. It requires that all properties be valued at full and fair cash value as of January 1st before the fiscal year begins. In this case, it's 2014. It's based on all comparable arm's length sales from the prior year. Taxes are based on your proportional share of the town value. And what that simply means is your value is at 100%. The total of all of the values equal the town value, so you own that proportion of the town, so each property owner pays that proportion of the taxes. Individual proportions can change from year to year. That's why it's a very dynamic process, and the values do change. Okay, so how do we do that? Well, the state requires that all assessors do a cyclical inspection program. People ask, how do you come up with our values? We never see you, this and that. Well, we're out there. You may not see us, but we're out there. Cyclical inspection program. The state mandates that you visit every single property a minimum of once every 9 years. Sales review. Anytime a property sells, I go out there and inspect the property. I go in it. I check to make sure, what, was it an arm's length sale? Did the buyer pay too much? Did the buyer not pay enough? I view every property, because those are the comps for value in all the other properties. I go out there on all building permits, or a member of my staff does. Every building permit, we check to see what did that do to the house. The revaluation field review, on that 3-year basis, the state requires you go out there and visit a minimum of 50% of your properties every 3 years for a field review. That's from the street. You don't have to go in that period. Every year we send out annual income and expense questionnaires to all income properties, commercial properties, apartment units, all of that kind of thing. Forms a list. We mail out a return every year to all of the businesses that own business equipment, and they have to return by law what they have and so forth, what they feel it's worth. We also inspect properties per taxpayer request if they think they're overvalued, or they just want us to look at it, and abatement applications, we go out there. So, valuation changes for this year. As you can see, single families went up in value based on the sales of about 1.25%, which is good. Condominiums went down 2.78%, and that's more on a condo complex case-by-case basis. Some complexes what were really adjusted. So the overall condominium market didn't go down by 2.7. It's more case-by-case. 2 and 3 family houses didn't really change. Based on the sales, multifamily didn't really change. Land didn't really change, just tiny, tiny adjustment. So the total residential class went up by 0.71 of 1%. The total commercial class, I mean, it was flat, didn't change at all hardly. And the total industrial went down ever so slightly. Okay. So your tax levy and tax rate. The tax levy is determined by, again, all appropriations and expenditures during the year, state and county charges, et cetera. It's paid for by using the state aid and reimbursements, the local receipts, excise taxes, fees, building permits, ambulance receipts, enterprise fund receipts, which are water and sewer funds, the revenues, free cash, stabilization, and other transfers lowers the amount to be raised. The remainder is the tax levy that has to be raised from the property tax, from the property owners. So, Town of Southbridge. These numbers here are straight off of the recapitalization sheet, which we're going to be submitting in the next couple of days to the state. And these are the identical numbers right off of that form. So the total amount to be raised by the town, this is a summary of all of, as I say, the appropriations and all of what we had previously talked about. It totals $58,022,000. From that, we have $22,509,000 in state aid. Local receipts total $5,511,000. Enterprise funds, the revenue from there is $7,267,000. And the remainder is free cash, transfers, stabilization funds applied, and overlay. The Board of Assessors is going to be releasing some overlay surplus. You have a vote in a little while on that. That goes to lower the tax rate. So if you take away all of those receipts from what the amount that has to be raised, that yields the $18,421,522 property tax levy. So, as we already said, the tax levy is $18,421,000. The total town value, which we established earlier, was $904,791,000. If you divide that, the tax levy by the total town value, it yields the $20.36 tax rate. So, comparison to last year. So this year we're raising $18,421,000. Last year, the levy was $17,639,950. That's an overall increase of $781,000, or 4.43%. As we talked about earlier, our new growth for the current year is $234,000. So the increase after the new growth is $547,000, or 3.1%. But the increase is the $781,000. I'd just like to point that out, that those additional taxes are from new taxpayers. Prop 2.5. Basically, it sets out a few things. It sets out a levy ceiling, and this is important. The levy ceiling states that in any year, property taxes cannot exceed 2.5% of the total assessed value of a town. And in Southbridge, our total assessed value is $904 million. If you multiply that by 0.025, that means our town's levy ceiling cannot be higher than $22,619,000. Now, we're not close to that, but this is a number that a lot of communities are starting to creep up to, and I just want to point it out. So the levy has to be below your levy ceiling, and it also has to be below your levy limit and your maximum allowable levy, another part of Prop 2.5. So what is a levy limit? What is this year's levy limit? Basically, you take last year's levy limit, you add 2.5% to that, you add any new growth, and that gives you your levy limit for the current year. And then if you have any voter-approved debt exclusions, you can add that, and that'll give you a maximum allowable levy. So for the town, last year's levy limit was $17,775,000. 2.5% increase is $444,000. Our new growth was $234,000. So our levy limit this year is $18,453,000. To that, you'll add the debt exclusion, the Bay Path debt exclusion, which was voter approved, $144,146, and that yields the maximum allowable levy of $18,597,000. Okay, excess levy capacity. So we just went over what the maximum allowable levy is, and on the 2015 row, to the right of that is the actual tax levy of $18,421,000, which means we have an excess levy capacity of $176,000. That's an additional amount the town could levy in property taxes, but chose not to. It's not lost. In the future, you can recapture that, but for the current year, you lose it. Okay. There's something called the residential exemption that I also want to bring up. The residential exemption is allowed by communities. Your residential share does not change at all. It has to be borne by the total residential class, but it allows a shift inside of that residential class. It allows up to a 20% discount to owner-occupied residential properties. And what it does is it shifts the burden from lower valued properties onto higher priced properties and non-residence homes. Okay? This works in communities with a large amount of vacation homes or non-owner occupied properties where you can shift the tax burden. In Southbridge, we don't really have that much of that. I can tell you there's a very limited amount of communities in the state who have that. I'm going to read them to you because you'll see the similarity or lack of to Southbridge. Barnstable, Boston, Brookline, Cambridge, Chelsea, Everett, Malden, Nantucket, Somerset, Somerville, Tisbury, Waltham, and Watertown. All of those communities that have it have either a large influx of apartment dwellers, Boston probably a lot of students and so forth, Tisbury, Barnstable, Nantucket, a lot of people who own summer homes. But that's not the case here. So the Board of Assessors strongly recommends against this exemption. I pointed out, but in our opinion, and based on the communities that have it, it doesn't really apply to us as useful. Classification factor. Mass General Law requires the council to adopt a factor between 1.0 and the minimum residential factor. It allows a maximum shift of 50% to the CIP classes, commercial, industrial, personal property. We have calculated the minimum residential factor in Southbridge to be 0.845621. So the council could adopt any factor between 1.0 and that 0.845621. A factor of 1.0, each class would be taxed at the same rate, same tax rate. And examples of shift based on various classes. Okay, I know that's really, really tiny. You guys have it. We have some handouts for the people in the audience, and I have a couple of blow-ups in the next slides. That's kind of small too, isn't it? Give me a second. Nope, can't blow that up any higher. I thought I could. So basically, I'll read it for you. What the highlighted yellow says, with a single tax rate, the average single-family property owner is going to pay $3,236 in property tax. The average commercial property owner is going to pay $822 in property tax, and the average industrial property owner is going to pay $10,300 in property tax. And that's based on the top here, you see the average single-family value is $158,000, the average commercial is $533,000, and the average industrial is $505,000. I apologize for that so small. If I didn't mention, my birthday was a long time ago, and my eyesight isn't really what it once was either, but, so that's what they are with a single tax rate. If we were to shift it, and you see the rows above it, all the way to a 50% shift to illustrate the maximum, the average residential would drop to $27.37 here, which is a savings of almost $500. But to do that, the average commercial would be increased by 50%, which would go from $10,008 to $16,233. So, and this is at the maximum. A relatively small amount of money, actually I take that back, a smaller amount of money would have a huge impact on a commercial and industrial tax basis. And you could do it anywhere in the middle, it would have a lesser effect. Okay, give me a minute. Okay. So our Board of Assessors does not feel that would be a good idea. Again, approximately a third of the cities and towns in the state do that, but some of those have the advantages of major highways going through their properties and other things. We don't have those advantages, and we don't feel that would be helpful in retaining our current businesses. Examples of a tax shift. Okay, so change from last year, from prior years. Again, I have a blow-up of this one as well. So the average condominium, their property tax this year is going to be $14.21. Last year it was $14.06. So they're going to be increasing by $14 or 1%. The average single family this year is going to be $32.36. And that's an increase, unfortunately, of $158, 5.14%. And the reason for this is overall there's an increase in everybody's taxes, as we talked about over last year. But the residential class picked up, their valuations were a little higher, so they're picking up a bigger share proportion of the overall taxes based on the valuation. Two families are going up 3.61%, three family 3.82%. Over 4-unit apartment buildings, their average tax bill is $57.90, and they're going up 3.31%. The average commercial is going up $526, or 5.11%, and the average industrial is going up 2.62%. Okay, so classification factor. Again, the Board of Assessors recommends a factor of 1.0. It's our belief that a shift, I've already gone into that, I won't say it again. This would yield a tax rate of $20.36 per $1,000 valuation. And now finally, tax-wise, how do we compare? I do this every year, and the statistics I'm going to bring you in a moment are right off of the Department of Revenue website. They're from their 2014 average single-family tax bills. So it's good to know how we stand statewide. According to statistics from the DOR, the average single-family tax bill in statewide was $5,020. The average single-family property tax bill in Southbridge last year was $3,078. So that means we were $1,942 less than, or 39% less than the state average. So they also rank all of the communities. Southbridge ranked 289th out of the 338 analyzed communities in the state in regards to the smallest average single-family tax bill. This put us in the lowest 14.5% in terms of average single-family tax bills. Again, last year, the average single-family tax bill in Southbridge was $3,038. This chart simply shows, in the maroon, you see the town of Southbridge on what's happened to our average single-family tax bill over the last, 21 years, and the green chart is the state, what's happened with the average tax bill across the state. This chart compares us a little bit to our neighbors. These are the towns of our direct neighbors who've actually set a tax rate. Charlton has not yet. That number in red is last year's average tax bill. But so Southbridge, our average tax bill this year is going to be $3,236. Town of Sturbridge, their tax rate is a little bit lower, as you can see, but their values are much higher, which yields an average tax bill of $49.18. Plus, they have a CPA surcharge of 3%, so of that $49.18, you add on roughly 3% to that, for what the average person pays there. Town of Auburn, they have a split rate. That blended rate is what it would be if it was only a single rate, $18.99. Their average single-family tax bill is $4,329. I'm not sure what happened, but they have an average increase of $535 to each single family. Town of Dudley, I say this every year, God bless them, their tax rate is $1,226, their average bill is $2,629. But they don't have many services at all. But just full disclosure, I like to point out what our neighbors are doing. Again, tax exemptions and help. The state offers, and the town of Southbridge offers, various exemptions to certain classes of people, typically needy or elderly or some veterans and so forth. There's an elderly exemption of $175. There's no income requirement on that, but your net assets, your whole worth has to be below $40,000 other than your house. Clause 41C, elderly exemption, that's a little tougher, and there is an income requirement on that. I'm not going to get into the details on this, but please, anybody who has any questions, call me. We have brochures. Our staff loves to talk to people about these and try to help them get eligible and help them out. There's a blind exemption. There's a hardship exemption. There's a tax deferral, which means if a senior, there's requirements, but if you have to be over a certain age, but if a senior does not want to, is having difficulty paying their property taxes, they can defer any or all of the current year taxes into, it's not a reverse mortgage, but the concept is similar. They don't pay it, but the town will have a lien on the property, and at some point when you sell it or you decease, you pay back what is owed. The town council, I think it was last year or the year before, voted by local option to reduce the interest rate on that to 5%. Okay? And then there's the senior tax abatement program where seniors volunteer in various departments and can get a credit each year of, I believe it's $600. And that's it. Thank you very much for your patience.
Okay. Councilor Vecchia?
I have one question, but I don't know if you're the answer to Karen Hanway. In the tax levy, free cash transfer stabilization overlay, we raised $4.3 million. Can you explain what that $4.3 million is made of?
Yeah, that's the sum, through the chair, that's the sum of all of the transfers that you did during the course of the year.
Oh,
Now,
wait a minute. Course of what year? Since I've been on the council, July 1st?
Yes.
I don't think so.
Actually, I'm going to pass that one to Karen. I'm going to pass that one to Karen if she would.
Okay.
And some of these, let me just say about these, some of these are mildly confusing because if you vote to take money and transfer it to stabilization, that's included in that. It looks like you're spending money, but you're really not. Okay.
So comment on the question. I don't mean to preempt Karen, but there are transfers that were made that are attributable to this fiscal year. They may have been made prior to July 1. There may be some on the agenda tonight. but they're
Well,
transfers that are attributable to this fiscal year.
Fine, but some of these transfers had to be made before this fiscal year.
Yes, they were made as part
Well,
of the
I'd just
budget.
like to know what were. You got $4.3 million in free cash transfer, stabilization, overlays. How much was transferred before I got on the council on July 1st?
It actually goes back to last December from the meeting after the tax rate was set. So it includes FY14 and FY15 to date.
That's what I thought. Now, let me ask you a question. We didn't take any free cash. We still got the $1.1 million in free cash now that was certified?
That's correct. There is one vote on the agenda tonight.
Where is it? And what's the vote for? Please.
It is agenda item number 17 to appropriate $67,000 from free cash to the school department for E-rate funds that were certified in free cash.
Of the 1.1 million we have, that would decrease it, 67,000.
That's correct. I believe it was $1,061,000 that was certified. The
That's right.
$67,000 would come off of
I
that.
understand completely. Thank you. That's my question. Thank you very much.
All set?
Yes.
Councilor Manna?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Mr. Cournoyer and Ms. Harnoy. The amount of taxes that are owed to the town or water sewer bills or excise tax, is that having an effect on our tax rate also? The amount of money that's owed to the town in back taxes or water sewer?
Karen didn't hear the question. Would you mind repeating it?
That's okay. The amount of money that's owed in back taxes or water, sewer, excise taxes or anything like that for the town, is that having an effect on the tax increase in town?
It does have an effect on the water and sewer rates.
Okay, but the property taxes, the back due property taxes wouldn't have an effect on the real estate taxes going up, the property taxes?
Well, we do budget a component of that, the tax lien interest. And then as the tax liens come in, that's additional other taxes that's added into our revenue for the year, but we do not budget that.
Okay, is there any way you could get us, or me, I can't speak for the rest of the council, perhaps they'd want one too, a copy of the amount of the taxes that are due and the back taxes?
You mean like what the balances are from prior years that are still
Yes.
outstanding?
Yes.
Okay, I'll make a note of that.
Okay, thank you very much. And also, I did receive a phone call from a concerned senior citizen in regards to the taxes going up. And she's quite concerned because in all reality, she's right. It is the residents of Southbridge that are bearing the burden of the taxes. And she has some grave concerns, especially when she sees things being done in town, and I try to explain to her, like with the sidewalks and whatnot. But these tax abatement programs that you have for the town, I mean, those are good, but you know, when senior citizens retire, sometimes that's what they want to do, is retire. But I like what you put up there, too, the tax exemptions and help. Is there any possible way you could actually put that on a scroll, too, for the people in Southbridge, the taxpayers of Southbridge, to see this? And maybe that'll prompt them more to call you to get the information on these programs that are out there that can help them.
Through the chair, tomorrow morning I'll put this on the website so that anybody can see it. As far as the cable, I mean, I can show them the presentation, how they would take that and make it into a cable scroll, I'm not sure, but...
Well, there's got to be something that you can put together to put on cable, because not everybody has access to a computer at home or the internet. So they do have access, a lot of our senior citizens, especially here in town, they like to watch the town council, they like to watch the public access television, and they get a lot of their information from there. So if something could be put on the scroll, that would be greatly appreciated.
I'll forward them some things tomorrow to put up there, I'm sure we can. They're welcome to watch me for another hour if they'd like. Bad joke, I apologize.
I think I figured out your age, too. So. That's it for right now. She did bring up some valid concerns, and other people in the past have brought those up to me also, the residents here in town. And I suppose that's something we should really be working on, is increasing our tax base here in Southbridge, making Southbridge, we want to make Southbridge home to the residents, but we also want to make Southbridge home for our businesses. And I understand what you're saying about the keeping the tax rate the same for the commercial and the residential also, because we want to increase our businesses coming into Southbridge.
Just to let the council know, it would be my plan in January to give the council a briefing on what projected revenue for the new year looks like. This is part of that picture that Will's shown you tonight, as well as a couple different pro forma budgets, and give you an indication of what would a budget look like that would be level services. In other words, everything that we did this year, we're going to do again next year, what would that cost? What would a budget look like that reduced taxation by increments of 1%. So we're planning to do that in January at one of your meetings, and then what I'm hoping is that the council will give us a little feedback about what it is you'd like to see us accomplish, and then with that feedback, in the month of February, we'll assemble the budget, and we'll try to accomplish whatever goal you set out. Absent any specific expressed goal, it would always be our goal to attempt to give you a balanced budget with reduced taxation. That would always be the goal.
Okay. And also to know on what you mentioned about Dudley, the services, and how they keep their tax rate so low. You're absolutely right. They don't have the services that Southbridge has. And I'm sure if they did have the services that Southbridge has, then they'd have the tax rate that Southbridge has also. So that's all. Thank you.
Councilor Steves?
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. First of all, our agenda mentions, the open space discount, but you didn't talk about that. Could you explain how that works? And
we don't classify by open space, so you don't get a discount for it. Some communities don't classify by open space, and that's been the history of our community. There would have been a vote. It's not. We don't do it, so I'm not an expert on that. So there is no open space. Along that line, though, and if I neglected to mention a couple of things in the presentation, I'd like to take a moment to mention that because it kind of falls into lines with what Councilor Steves is talking about. Some notable changes we had this year in the tax base was we had a few properties that the town sold off that were renovated, sold to private companies, renovated, and they've added to the tax base. I think it's real important. I'm sorry I neglected that. For example, the old DPW facility is now Expert Laser. There are jobs there, and there's quite a bit of taxation going on for their property. Another one is further up on Pleasant Street, the old McKinnon Training Center. Optimum Technologies bought that. It's now, they're doing some high-tech work in there, and they have contract employees, and it's taxable, and it's doing very good things. So, segueing back to what Councilor Steve's question was on open space discount, we have there are programs under state law called chapter land programs. Chapter 61, which is forestry, Chapter 61A, which is agricultural, horticultural, Chapter 61B, which is recreation land. We have large amounts of land that are in those programs. So Chapter 61, I think the minimum requirement is 10 acres on that. So if you're involved into the program accepted under the various state requirements, you're taxed at approximately 5% of your fair market value. You're valued at 5% of fair market value, you're taxed at it. So if you had a swath of land that's worth $100,000, for property tax purposes, you're paying approximately, valued at $5,000, approximately $100 a year. So, that's right. So that's sort of the open space discount. We don't have it, but we have large pieces of property in that. And incidentally, part of our tax base this year, we had either 5 or 6 properties that went into Chapter 61 this year that were previously valued at maybe $300,000, $400,000, $500,000. So what does that mean? Number one, it's good that the land is protected, because there's a lot of other legal things that go with the town that protects it. On the negative side, though, the town loses part of its tax base, and we all end up paying a little bit more for that. So I'm sorry I didn't answer the question directly, but that's kind of an overview of it.
The other thing I was also wondering about is that I looked at the DOR's website and I read something about, it was a document that was specifically a chapter 4 of, I think it was an assessor's training book. I could send it to you if you want it to confirm that's what it was. But anyway, one of the things it mentioned is a small commercial exemption. How would that work? And because the way I understand what that was saying is that would essentially favor small businesses with under 10 employees and under $1 million in valuation. How many businesses would that apply to in our town? And because I think that would help to encourage small businesses. How would that work?
I'll be frank with you, I haven't done preparation on that for this presentation because, number one, it's never been a question in the past, and what it really amounts to is the state will send us a list of businesses that will qualify, and they will get a little bit of a discount. It's not a very large amount of discount, and there aren't that many communities that I'm aware of that utilize that. Town of Auburn does. I don't know of any in our area here. So, this is an hour presentation, and I couldn't make it an hour and a half. But I just really haven't done the research on that one. I'm sorry. I will for next year, though. I'll add it, definitely.
And also regarding the residential exemption, if I was reading that same document properly, it says that it's 20% of the average single-family home value. Is it single-family home value or average residential total value?
It is not average single family, it's average residential. So for the town of Southbridge, every piece, what would happen is currently the residential class, if we have a single tax rate, will pay $20.36, just like every other class of property. That residential class picks up 76% of our tax burden. If we were to adopt a residential exemption, the residential class will still pay the same amount. But what happens based on the math on it is owner-occupied properties get an exemption of any amount up to 20%. Let's use 10 because it's simple math. 10% of the average value of a residential property. That amount, the average residential property is valued at about $133,000. So 10% of that would be $13,000. So if it was an owner-occupied property, it would have $13,000 of value exempted off of it. However, what happens is the residential class has to pay the same amount as it did before. So the residential tax rate would increase. Actually, if you wanted me to, I can look in my computer. I have some of these numbers, but it will increase by about $1.80, I think the number was. The residential tax rate would increase by $1.80. So what that means when you do all of the math on this, the lower valued properties would save some money because their drop would be more than the additional tax rate would add to it. The average single-family property value, which I showed before, was about $158,000. I think at a 10%, that would save about, I think the number was about $60. But houses that were valued more than that would save a little bit less and a little bit less. To the break-even point, if you had a house valued at approximately $190,000 and it was owner-occupied, they would pay more. And if their property was valued at $200,000, they would pay more still, even though they lived in it when they have a residential exemption. If the property was valued at $240,000, it would pay more still. If the property was valued at $300,000, it would pay more still. So what the math of this all does is it skews the savings to the lower priced properties. And there's no free lunch. Who pays for this? Well, the properties that are valued over approximately $200,000, even though they were owner-occupied, they would pay more. If they weren't owner-occupied, they would pay considerably more. If this residential exemption applies to, you have to live there. So if you have a single family and you live there, based on what we just talked about, you may save some money, or not. If it was a two-family, the same thing applies. If it was a three-family, you would still get the residential exemption. And based on the market's valuing of properties, because that's what they do, I mean, you see what two families are selling for and three families, an owner-occupied two-family would probably save more than an owner-occupied one-family. Now, if it wasn't owner-occupied, a two-family, three-family, four-family, they would pay a considerable amount more. Other unintended consequences, if it was a piece of land, you mentioned the open space discount. If it was a piece of land of, I don't know, if I own this house, this parcel with my house, and I own that parcel with 5 acres, I'd get the residential discount on my property. I wouldn't get the residential discount on the land, so the property taxes on the land would go up considerably. The property taxes on all land would go up considerably because it's not owner-occupied. So that's just the mechanics of it. Our skepticism to this goes far beyond that, Again, if we were Nantucket, and even if we were Webster, and Webster doesn't do this, if we had a lot of summer homes, it's a great idea to shift the taxes to the people who own property, and aren't there. Okay, so that's why Nantucket and whatever, some of the other Cape Towns I mentioned, Tisbury, I think, Boston, they get a huge inflow of students who rent apartments. Town of Southbridge, we have apartments too. However, so it may not be owner-occupied. We could charge them more because they wouldn't qualify for the residential exemption. Well, who lives in those apartments? Tenants who, are residents of our town. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, is it possible the landlord isn't going to pass on the tax increase? It's always possible that they charge what the market will bear, but if their costs go up, that goes up. That isn't even my biggest reservation. The biggest reservation that I have as an assessor, and other assessors have told me, is how do you keep this thing fair? Because you're going to have 5,000 people who are going to want to apply for this, and how do you know which ones they live in? How do you know which one's sold? I mean, there's a million different things.
Will?
Yes.
Could I just make a suggestion here?
Yep.
Mr. Chairman? A discussion about changing the minimum residential factor is a wonderful academic exercise. It is a inordinately inappropriate tool for a community like Southbridge. I think Will and the assessors concur. So while the discussion is fascinating, given the length of your agenda tonight in which you've got to get through, if I might humbly suggest to the council that this is a discussion that I would warmly invite you to have with Will on another time, just because this could go on a long time, and there's not a snowball's chance in heck that the council is going to change the minimum residential factor. You're not, I promise. It's just not going to happen. You would have a reaction beyond belief were you to do it in the community.
No, I wasn't thinking of doing that, actually. From what I was reading on the DOR website, I don't think it needs to be attached to a varied factor. Is that true, Will?
I'm sorry, would you mind repeating that?
If I'm reading, what I read on the DOR's website talked about these issues, but it didn't specifically say that it had to be attached to a varied classification. I didn't see any reason why we couldn't do it on a single classification.
You could do it on a single classification. It's a different item. But our board does not recommend splitting the tax rate and strongly does not recommend the other thing.
The impact on homeowners would be incredible.
Okay. I wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Councilor Clements?
Thank you. Just in reference to Councilor Steves, one of the papers you mentioned with the 10%, with the small business deference, I read that paper that you had sent to us, and it did once again state, similar to the other options, anytime, I mean, it's nice and it makes sense, and I'm all for small businesses, but somebody still bears the burden of that. And it did say specifically in that article that the burden would be borne by the residential class again for that.
Actually, it goes up to the other commercial class, if I remember correctly.
So it gets pushed over, and like everything else. And I would suggest if you want a longer meeting, more information, we can call some sort of a subcommittee meeting to really get into the meat of that, if that's something that you think needs more information. I just don't think that's a change that we could make tonight anyway, because it's not been put out there for us, but just a suggestion. Thanks. Yep.
Any other questions or comments for Mr. Cournoyer and the Board of Assessors on their presentation? Seeing none. Thank you, Mr. Cournoyer.
Thank you, and as I say, I'll be passing around a form that we need signatures on, just to say that the hearing was held and so forth. Thank you again.
Mr. Pecos?
Mr. Chairman, members of the council, I just wanted to express a kudo to Wil. I think this is the 33rd classification hearing that I participated in. The classification amendments to the state constitution passed in the early 80s, I believe. So I think this is 33, 34, right in there. I have never seen a more clear, succinct presentation given by any assessor anywhere on how this all works. That's a heck of a job, Wil, and I just wanted to be sure to say that and to draw that to the council's attention, because I've seen lots of these given. That was a heck of a job.
Thank you.
Thank you. We move on to agenda item number 9, which is vote to establish a tax classification factor of 1.0 for tax purposes. The Board of Assessors recommends a yes vote for a single tax rate.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Councilor Vecchia?
All right, I'd just like to state, agenda item 9, 10, and 11. Off this presentation tonight, one family's taxes will be raised I'm rounding off this. One family tax rates would be raised 5%, two family would be raised 4%, three families would raise 4%. I'm not for raising taxes, and I'm going to be voting no on 9, 10, and 11. If 4 other people with me vote no on 9, 10, and 11, then I guess we'd have to go back to the drawing board and look to cut the budget for the last 6 months. That's all I got to say. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Councilor Steves?
Actually, I do have a question following up on what he said. I don't know if this would be Karen or Wil, but probably Karen. So if that were to happen, what would that actually mean?
Let me take a stab at this. If you don't set a minimum residential factor tonight at this meeting, we can't submit the recapitulation sheet to the Department of Revenue in the next few days, which means we can't set a tax rate, which means we can't send out the tax bills, which means at some point this town government would cease to function.
Well, these are just scare tactics. This is the way I feel about it, okay?
I just
Fine,
want
you can say anything you want to say, okay? I understand that.
I just
Thank you.
want the council to understand that if 5 of you
Well, I've
voted
heard
in
this before.
favor,
This is the 8th council I served on, okay?
if I could finish,
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Yep.
If 5 of you voted in favor of that motion, what I just described to you would in fact occur. You would literally shut down the town government. It could not function because we can't levy a tax bill. You can't, I would submit to the council, you can't do that. You have to submit, you're not changing the budget. The budget is whatever you passed in the spring. So unless you want to redo that budget in the middle of the fiscal year,
There you go.
and cause you to not be able to submit the recapitulation sheet to the state, you cannot pass that motion. I'm sorry, you cannot fail to take action. You cannot. This would be a disaster for the community.
That's what you say, okay?
And I don't mean to cut you off, but I'm pretty sure that would represent what the CFO, the assessor, and I would all say to you.
That's fine. I just made one statement, okay? That's my opinion. You have your own opinion, okay? What are you laughing about? Okay, I've heard this for more than once, okay?
I'm not
Thank
trying to
you.
be disrespectful. I'm stating a fact. You must submit the tax recapitulation sheet to the state, or
I've
you
seen other
cannot raise
towns hold
taxes.
up the state 2-3 months, okay?
All right, so we're not going to get into any sort of heated debates. If we can, try to move along in a respectful manner if we are able to. Councilor Steves still had the floor, so.
Thank you. Also, since this is obviously directly tied into it, what would the items for 12 through 16, which are going to be requested as part of this tax recapitulation, what impact would those have on the tax rate if, as it seems, Councilor Vecchia seems to be inclined to do, if all of them were to be rejected?
These are interesting to debate here because it really isn't what the vote is for. I'm sorry, Councilor Steves, I didn't hear the question. Would you mind repeating it, please?
I was asking if by chance we were to reject questions 12 to 16, okay, and the funds that are in there, what impact would that have on the tax rates and the budget as a whole?
Well, each one is different. I can tell you, vote number 15 is vote to appropriate $50,000 to reduce the tax rate. So if you don't do that, the tax rate would be higher.
But all of the others would be more than counted.
Let me help here, Gus. You have to separate how much you're going to spend from who's going to pay how much of that.
I get that.
The classification, the setting of the minimum residential factor does not spend money. All it determines is who is going to pay what of the money you've already decided to spend. Later in the agenda, there's some additional spending that you'll be asked to do, which will affect the total amount of taxes to be raised or not, and that's up to the council. But the tax classification 9, 10, and 11 simply decides how the tax burden will be allocated. It does not spend money in and of itself.
Are you all set, Councilor?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Councilor Vecchia?
Well, listen, I disagree with you, because if we vote yes on 9, we're going to raise one family 5%, two families 4%, and three families 5%. And I don't want to get into discussion about this, okay? That's what I feel about it, okay? Simple layman's term. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments, or concerns? Councilor Carrasco?
I understand, through you, Mr. Chair, maybe to Mr. Cournoyer, because now Councilor Vecchia brings a point, and Councilor Steve says something else. By us voting to establish, because this is what it says, establish the tax classification of the 1% for tax purposes, that is what you have presented. So it would be the 5% increase in taxes.
Yeah, number 9 says a factor of 1.0. It simply says a single tax rate. It's what I presented, yes.
So by voting yes, we are basically saying we are voting to raise our tax rate for our citizens at 5%.
If you decide you don't want to do that, then you have to, on number 10, you have to decide what percent do you want to shift it to the commercial base.
If I may, when you passed a budget this past spring for this July 1st, for this fiscal year, that's when you made the decision to increase taxes. Tonight, all you're deciding is how to allocate the tax burden that you've already decided to raise. If you adopt a minimum residential factor of 1, then what you're saying is you're going to tax everybody equally, all classes of property, business, industry, open space, residential, personal property. The decision isn't to raise taxes. We're reporting to you the effect of what you already did in the spring when you voted a budget, which increased taxes.
Which I was against.
Correct. So all you're doing tonight with these 3 votes is deciding, will residential pay its share at a residential factor of 1.0, what would be normally allocated to them, or do you want to change that and have somebody pay more? Now, in this case, if you lower taxes on residents, you're increasing taxes on business, on CIP, commercial, industrial, and personal property. So, and unfortunately, in order to give residential homeowners a little break, because they own 75% of the tax total value, you've got to hit business with an enormous increase because they only have 25% of the value. So a proportionate shift from residents onto business is a huge burden for them, which is why we recommend a tax classification factor of 1, and everybody pays essentially their fair share of the burden. But I just wanted to be clear to the council, you are not voting to raise taxes. You are only voting to take the taxes you've already raised in the spring and allocate them according to the classes of property. That's all.
Well, therefore, I was against the budget in this past one. So obviously, I'm going to vote against this because, again, this is, I don't want to see taxes raised myself. I think we need to do a better job with our spending with each department. We have people in positions that shouldn't be, and that's something that I've always said from the get-go, and it's going to affect the ones that are constantly paying, our residents, our seniors, the retired folks. Where do we want them? They're going to leave our town. Yeah, you can sell your house. No, you can't. You can't sell a house in Southbridge. Nobody wants to come here. We got other issues that we have to deal with. We got a school department that we have to fix. So we got other problems here to get people here. So by us raising taxes and raising, we're going up another 3%. I know we're hopeful that we're getting new businesses, but we're not seeing that. So is there a possibility that we keep everything where it was from last year?
The only way that you could, now remember, you are 6 months into the fiscal year now. You have already spent, well, you're 5.5, so you've already spent approximately 50% of that money that you voted in the spring in the budget. If you were to, let's say theoretically, try to now tonight cut the budget at a number sufficient to have no tax increase, you'd still have to adopt the minimum residential factor because you still have some amount of money you're raising and we've got to know how you want to allocate it. But if you were to take a vote tonight, you'd have to cut, I'm going to guess, somewhere around $700,000 out of the budget in order to not have any tax increase of any type, irrespective of who pays what percent of it. And we would have to actually sit right here and make that budget cut. We would have to do it. Now, because you're already 6 months into the year, you can't cut $700,000 because you've already spent at that rate. You'd have to cut $1.4 million. So in order to do that, you'd have massive layoffs, which would have to occur beginning next week, presumably, and continue in effect till June 30. I would submit to the council that is not a responsible action for obvious reasons. The opportunity for the council to speak with respect to its goals on taxation is in the budget that you're going to be starting in just a few weeks for July 1 of next year, and then you can express whatever goal you'd like. And the range is endless. It's cut taxes to don't increase as much as we could. And it's anywhere on that spectrum that you want to say. And then with that information, we will write a budget for you that will accomplish that purpose. But I guess it's the reality is this. The horse is out of the barn at this point. You voted a budget in the spring. We can't sit here tonight and cut that budget because effectively what would happen is you've got to cut twice as much as what you want to save because you're halfway through the year. And in the meantime, while you're working on that, we can't set a tax rate, which means we can't send out tax bills, which means we can't collect the money that we need to operate, which means we have to shut down the town government. Literally. That's what all that means.
I have Councilor Vecchia and then Councilor Steves.
I'm all set.
Okay, Councilor Steves?
Thank you. One other quick question. Is there any way we can do this classification hearing and process at the same time we do the budget? Because it seems like every year, obviously I've only been here since June, but every year I've covered it, it seems like the same debate pretty much happens at the same time every year.
Massachusetts state law requires you to set a budget prior to the start of the fiscal year for which you are budgeting.
Right.
You are not allowed to do this classification hearing until you've proceeded a certain ways into that budget year, because certain numbers that they need in order to determine the values put in front of you, we don't have until we're 4, 5, 6 months into the fiscal year for which we are now setting the tax rate. When I present to you, Karen and I present to you in January, what I already described to you, we are going to give you the tools to understand exactly what a budget looks like for July 1 of next year that will not raise taxes, and what a budget looks like that will raise taxes, and by how much. We'll give you all those tools in January before we start preparing a budget for you. And if you say to me as a council that on July 1 of next year you don't want taxes to increase 1 penny beyond this year, then I will write a budget that will do that, and we'll show you what that means. But you can't, unfortunately, the way municipal finance law works, You can't have this tax classification hearing 6 months ago when you set the budget.
Okay. All set, Councilor? Councilor Vecchia?
Through the chairman to the town manager. 10 minutes ago, you said you'd also give us a budget with a 1% cut. Now, you didn't state that this time, okay? So you're changing your words, all right? So we could discuss this all night long, all right? I don't want to get into any arguments. Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments on the agenda item? Okay. Seeing none, roll call, please.
Counselor Clements?
Yes.
Counselor Estrada?
No.
Counselor Manna?
Yes.
Counselor Moriarty?
Yes.
Counselor Pelican?
Yes.
Counselor Steves?
Yes.
Counselor Vandal?
No.
Counselor Vecchia?
No.
Counselor Crosco?
No.
5 yes, 4 no.
Motion carries. Moving on to agenda item number 10, vote to adopt varied classifications of property for tax purposes, including open space discount and residential exemption. The Board of Assessors recommends a no vote.
So moved.
Second?
Any questions, comments, discussion? Okay. Seeing none, roll call, please.
Counselor Estrada?
No.
Counselor Manna?
No.
Counselor Moriarty?
No.
Counselor Pelican?
No.
Counselor Steves?
No.
Counselor Vandal?
Yes.
Counselor Vecchia?
No.
Counselor Crosco?
No.
Counselor Clements?
No.
1 yes, 8 no.
Motion carries, motion fails. Reverse logic there. Agenda item number 11, vote to adopt a single tax rate for all classes of property. The Board of Assessors recommends a yes vote.
So moved.
Second?
Any questions, comments, discussion? Councilor Steves?
Mr. Chairman, just for clarification, on item 10, the no vote was offered and it was approved, correct?
The no vote carried.
Thank you.
So the motion itself, the agenda item number 10 fails.
Thank you.
Councilor Steves?
One quick question is, how is agenda item number 11 any different from what we just did in number 9?
I don't believe it is. The Department of Revenue requires these votes. They require them to be certified. It's so that there is no doubt you voted for a single tax rate, no doubt you voted for a factor of 1, and no doubt that you voted not to split the tax rate. It's very redundant, but that's what they require.
You're very correct. It's duplicative, but that's the way the Department of Revenue wants it.
Any other questions, comments? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Counselor Manna?
Yes.
Counselor Moriarty?
Yes.
Counselor Pelican?
Yes.
Counselor Steves?
Yeah.
Counselor Vandal?
Yes.
Counselor Vecchia?
No.
Counselor Crosco?
No.
Counselor Clements?
Yes.
Counselor Estrada?
Nope.
6 yes, 3 no.
Motion carries. Moving on to agenda item number 12, vote to amend the fiscal year 2015 Town of Southbridge General Fund operating budget in the amount of $54,591.
So moved.
As follows.
Oh, sorry. I'm quick.
Southbridge Public Schools, $41,786. Southern Worcester County Regional School District, otherwise known as Bay Path Regional Vocational Technical High School, would be a credit of $16,695 coming back to us. Recreation salaries and wages, $8,000. Reserve for property repair, maintenance, and demolition, $21,500. The total budget revisions in the amount of $54,591.
So moved.
Second.
Okay,
Okay, we do know the protocol.
we have Councilor Steves. Can you have a little explanation
Can
of what these
I
are?
give you a quick overview?
That's what I was
Because
gonna
that'll
ask
probably
for.
head off the questions. Great, thank you. So the Southbridge Public School, $41,000. This is money that was promised to them in the spring if Cherry Sheet, Chapter 78, emerged at a high enough level. Recall that when you're doing the budget in May, the state hasn't finished its work on the Cherry Sheet. We don't get it till July. So there was an expectation we might get more. But since we didn't have it yet, you voted a lower budget, but you said to them, if that Chapter 78 does come in, you'll get the money later. So this is the realization of that tonight. We did get more money. The Bay Path Bay Path Regional School got more money in Chapter 70 transportation aid, regional transportation aid, than they had anticipated because of the same process. And they very admirably re-voted, recertified their budget, and you're actually cutting their budget $16,000. And kudos to them for so doing, because they're not under any compulsion to recertify their budget. The recreation salaries and wages, this is the money that Charlton is going to pay us for the regional veteran services. Now, Mike, as you recall, will physically go over to Charlton. Right now, it looks like 8 hours a week. This money puts this appropriation puts that money from Charlton into the recreation budget, so we can hire the person who is then going to backfill for Mike and keep the Council on Aging building open when he's over in Charlton. The third appropriation, the reserve for property repair, maintenance, and demolition, your property casualty insurance came in higher than was anticipated when you got the bill in July, after you had already set the budget in May. So earlier, we had to pay some money out of the building demolition account to pay that property casualty bill. This transfer puts the money back into building demolition and frankly gives us enough money, hopefully, to do the next demolition project somewhere in town. So that's the effect of these 4 votes.
So in practice, I understand you properly, this really doesn't affect the tax rate at all?
This does not raise taxes. This appropriates money that we already have.
Okay.
Appropriates and reappropriates, moving it around.
Councilor Vecchia?
Through the chairman to the town manager, you just made a comment, 4 votes. This is only, we're voting everything together. It's just going to be just 1 vote.
Well, you can separate them if you want.
Yeah, I'd like to separate them.
Okay, so you would have to make that in a motion then, in the form of a
I make a motion to separate the vote.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion on the proposal to separate the votes? Councilor Manna?
I suppose I do have a question to Councilor Vecchia as to why do you want to separate these?
I want to vote no on one of them.
Thank you.
Any other discussion or questions or comments on the motion to separate these? Okay.
It's kind of, I have a question, but it's not going to go to separation.
So it would be for one of the actual individual items.
I mean, if I may, through you, Mr. Chair, to the town manager, how much money did we get total? Is this the total amount that we got
In cherry sheet aid? No. Karen, I think it was 80-something thousand.
It's 80 trees. It's half of the Southbridge Public Schools. We're going to get a half. She already said that at the last meeting.
If I could, we received an additional $124,000 in cherry sheet receipts, but our cherry sheet offsets went up $29,000, and our state and county charges went up $17,000. So about $70,000 to $75,000 increase in cherry sheet aid.
Then my question is, if there's 75,000, where's the rest of the 21,000? Where is it sitting?
There should have been in your packet a spreadsheet that was changes from the original budget to what it was now, and there's several different categories where the changes were made.
It's on the back of your tax classification package. Looks like this.
There were also additional local receipts of $68,000, so all of this was summarized in that. Those were all the different changes and how they were allocated. Actually, if you don't mind if I point out, too, from what the original estimate was in the tax levy, it was reduced by $92,000.
You all set for now, or?
Yeah, unfortunately, I didn't see this.
Any other questions or comments on the motion to split or separate these 4 items? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Councilor Moriarty?
Yes.
Councilor Peliquin?
No.
Councilor Steves?
No.
Councilor Vandal?
Yes.
Councilor Vecchia?
Yes.
Councilor Kraska?
Yes.
Councilor Clements?
Yes.
Councilor Estrada?
Yes.
Councilor Manna?
No.
6 yes, 3 no.
Okay. So Agenda item 12A, then, will be vote to amend the fiscal 2015 Town of Southbridge General Fund operating budget for the Southbridge Public Schools in the amount of $41,786.
So moved.
Second.
Questions, comments, or discussion? Councilor Clements?
Thank you. Well, as it seems to be stated over and over and over about cutting the budget, and obviously this is something that was discussed in the spring and was agreed upon, acceptable, that we would give some more money to the school based on whether or not we got money back from the state. So, as you've said, the horse is already out of the barn on this particular budget. But for future reference, I can tell you, if there's a place where we need to start saving some money, it's on the school budget. So while we talk about cutting our main budget in this community, we need to look at everything. And I hope everybody realizes that with the discussions that were had previous to this. That's all.
Councilor Vecchia?
In the year 2002, I was on a council and I was the chairman of Education and Human Services. We got an additional $1.9 million in Chapter 70 money. And many town councilors didn't want to give that money to the schools, even though the schools should have got that money. We were not legally obligated to give that money to the schools, but we were morally obligated. And I fought to give that money to the schools. Southbridge Public Schools, you got $41,786. The Chapter 70 money is supposed to be towards schools. As Ms. Hanoi said, we got like $75,000 in for the public schools. I would have voted to give them the whole $75,000 because that money was earmarked for the schools. So I'll be voting yes. Thank you.
Any other, Councilor Manna?
I have a question. Mrs. Harnoy, to you. Was that Chapter 70 and unrestricted local aid money, or was that just strictly Chapter 70?
The increase
Yes.
was in the unrestricted government aid.
So it wasn't earmarked just for the school?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Well, did I stand corrected? I thought you said it was Chapter 70 money.
No, it was additional unrestricted government aid.
I think I said that, Apple, and my apologies. I was under that impression. I
Because
did
you've
not
been
know
saying that right along to me, we're going to vote on this Chapter 70 money.
Thank you.
So-
My mistake.
Well,
I thought
okay.
it was Chapter 70. It was unrestricted general aid? Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. That changes my vote. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Ms. Harno, Mrs.
I
Harno?
could just make an additional comment. This monies and then the other vote on 17 for the free cash, the reason why this was also allocated to the school was because that would bring them up to approximately a 3% increase on their budget, which is on the town side approximately what the increase was. So this would make it comparable.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, roll call, please, on the vote to amend the fiscal 2015 Town of Southbridge General Fund operating budget for the Southbridge Public Schools in the amount of $41,786, please.
Councilor Peliquin?
Yes.
Councilor Steves?
Yes.
Councilor Vandal?
Yes.
Councilor Vecchia?
No.
Councilor Krasko?
Yes.
Councilor Clements?
Yes.
Councilor Estrada?
Yes.
Councilor Manna?
Yes.
Councilor Moriarty?
Yes.
8 yes, 1 no.
Motion carries. Agenda item 12B, vote to amend the fiscal 2015 Town of Southbridge General Fund operating budget in the amount, with a credit in the amount of $16,695 for the Southern Worcester County Regional School District, or BayPath.
So, second.
The motion, Mr. Chairman, would be to reduce
Okay.
the budget by that amount.
We'll take that as a friendly amendment. Thank you. Councilor
I
Steves?
just had a question that since we were just talking about Chapter 70 a second ago, and this was Chapter 78 from BayPath, what would be the effect if we were to just simply transfer it to the public schools?
Good question.
Now, Karen, you're going to have to help me here. This is regional transportation aid, which was on the cherry sheet for the regional school. I do not believe you can transfer that revenue to the local school budget, correct?
You could transfer the $16,695 from Bay Path to the school budget,
To the,
to the Southbridge Public Schools budget.
even though it's on a separate cherry, this aid didn't come to the town, it came directly to, as an offset to the budget for the regional school, correct?
Correct. So if you have a reduction in that budget, you could increase another budget for a net effect of zero.
You're not transferring the same money, you're freeing up other money which can then be used for the local school if that's the will of the council. But you're not transferring the same money.
Oh, okay.
It's not transferable.
Okay.
But it frees up money which is then available.
Councilor Manna?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. To Mrs. Harnois, does this have to be used for the school? Can it be
No.
used somewhere else in our budget?
That's correct. What this is basically doing here is netting out to the $54,000. So this $16,000 credit is being used against one of these other line items here.
Thank you.
Councilor Carrasco?
My question would probably be through you, Mr. Chair, to the town manager or Ms. Harnois. Why not leave it at Bay Path?
The reason is their transportation budget was set in May for all the member communities, and the apportionment to each of the member communities came to their councils, town meetings, whatever. Then they voted them, and so that budget was set, and a certain amount of it was for regional transportation. Subsequent to those votes taking place in July, the Legislative Conference Committee produced the new cherry sheets, and Bay Path picked up more money in regional transportation that had originally been estimated. They then recertified their budget, reduced it by the amount of additional regional transportation aid that they picked up, and allowed the taxpayers in each of the member communities to spend a little less. So if you reduce this budget by this amount, it falls to the benefit of Southbridge's taxpayers. It'll fall to free cash, basically.
So, thank you.
So if I may, essentially what we're doing here with a yes vote is you are, to an extent, reducing what the taxpayer has to fund by almost $17,000.
Right. And if, by the way, if Southbridge does not do this, and the other member communities all do it, then you would have just given $17,000 approximately of Southbridge taxpayer money to the regional school when no other town did, and I'm sure the regional school would be very grateful, but I'm not sure that your taxpayers would be.
Mrs. Harnoy?
If I could just make a comment on that, we actually would not pay that out to Bay Path.
Unless a majority did it?
Well, they've already voted to send it back.
They're going to send us a bill, and it's going to be at the end of the year. If you voted not to do this, we would have $16,695 left in that line item. Like you said, it would
Which would fall
fall
to
to
free
free
cash.
cash.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, roll call vote, please, on the vote to amend the fiscal 2015 Town of Southbridge General Fund operating budget with, we said a reduction, is that the friendly amendment?
A reduction in the budget?
I believe that was the term we used. A reduction in the budget in the amount of $16,695 credited to the Southern Worcester County Regional School District or Bay Path.
Counselor Steves?
Yes.
Counselor Vandal?
Yes.
Counselor Vecchia?
Yes.
Counselor Krasko?
Yes.
Counselor Clements?
Yes.
Counselor Estrada?
Yes.
Counselor Manna?
Yes.
Counselor Moriarty?
Yes.
Counselor Peloquin?
Yes.
9 yes.
Motion carries. Moving to 12C, vote to amend the fiscal 2015 Town of Southbridge General Fund operating budget in the amount of $8,000 for recreation salaries and wages.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Mr. Manager?
I've given
You already did, that's right. I'm sorry. Councilor Clements?
Thanks. Yes, you gave an explanation, but actually, isn't this because we approved an increase to the rec director's salary?
You approved the regional Veteran Service Officer District creation. So Mike Trombley, our VSO, will now spend some time in Charlton.
I understand.
When Mike's in Charlton, we don't have anyone to operate the building here. So the recreation director will function, the person we have not yet hired, but which is budgeted, will function as the rec director and assistant COA, if you will, and part of their duties will be to manage the building and the COA programs while Mike is away in Charlton. So we need this money transferred in order to partially to pay salaries, program expenses, whatever.
Right. But again, we're talking about cutting budget, so perhaps we just need a reduction in time at the community center. Or,
Right,
you
so
know.
if you don't vote this $8,000, then this money from Charlton would fall to the bottom line to free cash. But there would be some things, and I can't tell you specifically tonight, that we would not be able to do with respect to that program down there. So I can't be more specific than that, but it would be $8,000 worth of recreational senior programming.
Right, but once we officially hire this person, that I believe you've been interviewing for, it adds an added cost to the overall budget. So
Yes.
it's going to be interesting to see how you come up with that level or 1% reduced budget scenario.
Remember, the budget is absolutely neutral because Mike's salary was reduced by this $8,000, and Charlton is giving us this $8,000, but we can't, we're moving it from one account to the other, but we're not increasing the net budget by anything. This is the money that Charlton is paying us.
No, I understand that, but we're still increasing hours with another position, an enhanced position for the future. But, okay, I'm all set. Thank you.
Councilor Steves?
Just a quick question. Do we actually have Charlton's payment in hand?
We're right now working to start the program probably on January 1, because this is one of the things that we've got to get ironed out before we can. I wanted to start that regional VSO in December 1, but there's a whole bunch of small details we needed to get ironed out, one of which is the final approval from the state. I think we have that in hand now. And we didn't want to start in the middle of a month because that's just too messy to prorate the payments. So we just decided we'd start on January 1. So this $8,000 represents what we'll get for 6 months from Charlton, not the full year allocation.
And do you have, actually have a time frame for when they're actually going to pay us? Do they pay us in a lump sum or on a monthly basis? Or
They're going to pay on a monthly basis,
On a monthly
yes.
basis?
Yep, I think it's $1,600 a month?
I think it's 1,300.
1,300, I'm sorry, thanks.
Councilor Vandal?
So what does a yes vote get us?
A yes vote on this agenda item?
Yes.
It appropriates $8,000 into the recreation budget. It increases the rec budget by $8,000. And we don't have to decrease the other budget because we're just not going to pay that out.
Thank you.
Any other question? Councilor Manna?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you to your town manager. But as Councilor Clemens pointed out earlier, it's going to open up that position. You're going to hire another person, and it's going to be more than $8,000 next year, correct?
Not necessarily. Right now, you have a recreation director position budgeted. It may be possible, and I can't tell you yet, it may be possible with the money that's already in the budget to hire the person for enough hours so that they can do everything we need to have them do in recreation and have them keep the building open while Mike is in Charlton. The reason I can't say that for certain is because we've not had a recreation program in the past. You funded it this year for the first time, and we've not had somebody really functioning in the position. I believe, you know, the airport director was trying to do both, and it didn't work out that he was able to do both. So we're hiring another person that's been advertised, and we've been waiting to do the hire until all this settled, so we can tell the person, you're working 15 hours or you're working 20 hours. So this is all part of that process.
So this $8,000...
So if you did not approve this, then I would probably keep the recreation budget right where it is, and this $8,000 would fall to free cash.
Okay. Could you tell us where the rec department, that amount that you're looking to spend?
I'm sorry?
The amount of money for the rec position? Not the $8,000. I'm talking about the money that was...
I believe the budget that was set up was in the range of 13,000 or something.
13,000?
So this would add to that.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
And this is not necessarily for salary. this may well be for program expense and things like that, because apparently there was, I can't tell you why, because I didn't write that budget, but we put some salary money in, but we didn't put any expense money in. So you have a rec director who has no money to do anything. So this 8,000 is going to provide both potentially extra hours if they're needed, but also give the rec director some money to work with for youth programming. But by the way, the reason I put this in here was very specifically to respond to the council's stated intention that you wanted to see more youth programming in town. So without this, we have no budget to do that. So my presumption was that you wanted this.
Well, my understanding as a rec director isn't just directed towards youth programming, it's directed towards other things in town also.
Correct.
Let's include the senior citizens and the regular citizens
Right.
for the down at the Common, the concerts on the Common and whatnot. So it's not just directed towards youth, it's directed towards multiple things in town.
Sure.
That's it.
Yes, thank you.
Councilor Carrasco?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, then, if I hear our town manager correctly, it's going to be for the operational budget of the rec department.
Yes.
So should this be changed where it says salary and wages and just say recreation department? Because again, we're tying it into the salary line item.
I don't,
Once
Karen,
again,
you can
and
help
then
me here.
you're not
If
going to
it's-
have an operational, according to what you just said, they don't have money to pay anything, they just have a salary. So I don't know if that will be helpful.
If this is voted into the salary and wages line, and it turns out we don't need it for salary, but we
You're
do
stuck.
need it for program expense, would we be able to do that, or would we be restricted?
We can internally transfer.
That's what I thought. Okay, yeah, not a problem. You don't do your entire municipal budget line by line by line. You do it in big blocks, and that allows transferability within certain limits. And if the council wants to restrict it to those several thousand lines, you'd have to vote every one of those several thousand lines individually, and then the staff could not move money between lines. As it is, statutorily we can, and that's how you've always done your budget, but that's up to you.
That's all I have to say.
Any other questions or comments? Just for myself, personally, I think that the rec department is historically been non-existent, which is grossly inadequate for the community that we have, the level of needs that we have in this community, and 8,000 is not a whole lot. I'd rather see the 25, 35,000 we spend per cruiser every year for multiple cruisers spent here, rather than getting yet another new cruiser, 2, 3 of them at a time.
Okay.
So a roll call, please, on the vote to amend the fiscal year 2015 Town of Southbridge General Fund operating budget in the amount of $8,000 for the recreation salaries and wages. Please.
Counselor Vandal?
Yes.
Counselor Vecchia?
No.
Counselor Crosco?
Yes.
Counselor Clements?
Yes.
Counselor Estrada?
Yes.
Counselor Manna?
Yes.
Counselor Moriarty?
Yes.
Counselor Peliquin?
Yes.
Counselor Steves?
Yes.
8 yes, 1 no.
Motion carries. Lastly, agenda item 12D, vote to amend the fiscal year 2015 Town of Southbridge General Fund operating budget in the amount of $21,500 for reserve for property repair, maintenance, and demolition.
Second.
Any discussion, questions, comments? Seeing none, roll call, please, on the vote to amend the fiscal 2015 Town of Southbridge General Fund operating budget in the amount of $21,500 for reserve for property repair, maintenance, and demolition. Please.
Counselor Vecchia?
Yes.
Counselor Crosco?
Yes.
Counselor Clements?
Yes.
Counselor Estrada?
Yes.
Counselor Manna?
Yes.
Counselor Moriarty?
Yes.
Counselor Peliquin? Yes. Counselor Steves?
Yep.
Counselor Vandal?
Yes.
9 yes.
Motion carries. Thank you. Agenda item number 13 is vote to appropriate $375,000 from the landfill royalty receipts reserved account number 6790 to the fiscal year 2015 contributory retirement account as the second additional payment for fiscal year 2015.
Did you say 3 or 275?
If I said 2, then it was an error. It should be 375.
It could very easily have been my ears. I just want to be sure.
That's fine.
So moved.
This is
We just
continuation.
need a second.
Need a second.
Yep, thank you.
This is continuation of the council's program to continue funding the unfunded portion of the pension system. You've been doing this annually every year, and apparently from what Karen tells me, you've been taking it from the landfill royalty receipts account.
Okay. We have Counselor Steves.
Actually, I think Councilor Vecchio was first.
Okay, go ahead.
Why are we taking it from the landfill royalty receipts account? I don't like to take money from the landfill and put it someplace where it doesn't belong. Can you explain to me why we're taking it from the landfill account? What's that got to do with the landfill?
We have two pieces in our budget that are unfunded or underfunded. One is the retirement system, which is just funded over 50% by our last evaluation, and the OPEB, which just has the 3 payments that we've made previously.
What did you say?
The OPEB, Other Post-Employment Benefits Fund.
Yes.
We've made 3 payments so far of these amounts respectively into these funds. The landfill royalty are one type of like one-time revenue, so we definitely don't want to use those towards the budget. They would be more used towards items like this where we need funding that's available currently to bring us up to a better funding point on that. We use a small amount of it for capital from the royalty receipts reserved, and that was our plan in the budget. This is the second fiscal year that we're following the budget plan that our former town manager, Christopher Clark, laid out.
Oh, I'm not done. Again, it's a landfill royalty account. I don't think we should be using it for anything but the landfill, so that's all I got to say. Thank you.
Counselor Steves?
First off, how much money do we actually have in the landfill royalty account?
Okay. Before these transfers, let me see right here, we have $1.4 million. If we deduct the $375, then we'll have $1,060,000. And it increases every month as the revenue comes in from the tonnage.
Okay. This agenda item mentions it's the second additional payment. We had another payment previous in this fiscal year?
We had a payment that we voted in May when we voted the fiscal 15 budget, so we do it in the 2 pieces.
And that was a payment for this fiscal year?
Yes, and then we made the 2 payments in fiscal 14 as well. So we started it in 14, and this is the second for 15.
So at this rate, how long would we be doing this to match the funding that I'm assuming the state is requiring or suggesting?
Well, we couldn't reach the funding level that we need to reach, but we had estimated that we would do this for 10 years, as long as we had the landfill funding. Now, I know that's a little bit in question, but I believe the intention is to keep doing this as long as we have those additional landfill revenues.
What's the arc, Karen, to reach 20-year full funding? Annual required contribution,
I know in just the recent report, it was not the annual contribution, but it was $47+ million, and actually came down from over $61 million.
Okay,
That was
so-
the OPEB, the Other Post-Employment Benefits.
So we're unfunded for a liability that we have to pay to the tune of tens of millions of dollars. So I think the answer to the question is, without knowing the exact, if we were to continue funding at this rate, we probably never would stop, because we're not, we have something called the annual required contribution, the ARC, and that says how much we need to put aside at actuarial tables that say how long your retirees are going to live, with assumptions for what that fund will make in interest in the market to equal full funding. And if you put in less than the annual required contribution, then you never catch up. So this is not adequate, but at least it's a step in the right direction. And as Karen says, it's taking a source of revenue, which is non-cyclical. Eventually, that money from the landfill is not going to be paid to us anymore.
Yeah.
And rather than put it into the operating budget, which means when the revenue runs out, but the cost is still in the operating budget, you're in trouble. We're putting it into one-time expenses or unfunded liabilities, which is a very prudent and conservative fiscal posture, which the rating agencies for our bonds very much like to see the town doing. And even though we're not doing it at the level we should, we're at least making some progress.
And also, since this is a landfill royalty account, I just want to clarify, do we ultimately have any long-term funding responsibilities for, especially for those last two cells at the landfill? Should we be putting some of the landfill royalty money into something to fund that?
The operator has those responsibilities, not the town.
I'm not entirely sure of that.
I'm sorry?
Those are the pre-existing unlined landfill sites I'm referring to. Can we clarify that to be sure that they actually are responsible for that? Because I'm not sure they are.
I'm sorry, I'm not understanding the question.
Excuse me. What I was asking is that, as I understand it, and I could be wrong, as I understand it, we will ultimately have responsibility for lining and capping two of the oldest landfill cells, which are currently not lined. And if I'm wrong, I hope I am. But if I'm not, do we have any plan for setting aside money to make sure that we have funding to do that? Because that's going to be a huge expense.
I don't know anything about this whatsoever. It's not been brought to my attention, so I don't know.
Well, I do know that the landfill operator does carry the bonds for closure and post-closure.
For all of that, including that section, landfill too?
But I think you're suggesting there's some closing responsibility somewhere else that's the town's for another landfill?
I'm not sure. I'm just trying to clarify it because...
This much I can tell you. The landfill that Casella operates, they are 100% responsible for post-closure costs. We are not. I can state that categorically.
Okay.
Now, if there's a landfill somewhere else that I don't know about,
yes.
then you got me, and I apologize, I don't know.
No, that is
But
what
in
I'm
terms of
referring
the
to. I hope so.
landfill, it's 100% theirs, not ours.
Okay, I hope so. Good. Okay.
All set, Councilor Steves? Yep. Councilor Clements?
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify, I've been around for a few years, so I remember when Chris Clark put this plan into place. It has been and still is a big concern for many communities in Massachusetts who do not have a funding source and cannot meet their obligation for their retirees. Many communities are way beyond even what we owe, and if I'm not mistaken, I know it's auditors or obviously it's not my professional skill here on this, but I know that we were applauded with actually putting a plan into action and using some of this source to fund our obligation, which, as I said, many communities cannot. So I guess that's a good thing that we have these funds to be able to do this, because as Mr. Pecos has pointed out, we'll probably never catch up to something that the state has decided is every community's obligation now, unfunded mandates, and they're in our pocket to have to deal with. So it's a good plan. It's got meat for the next, whatever, hopefully 10 years, but maybe less. And at that point, we'll be in some serious positions again as a community. Where do you come up with the money? How do you come up with extra millions? One of the problems that we face is we have our school choice, which has grown from $750,000 5 years ago, almost 6 years ago, to well over $1 million now. Those are obligations that other communities don't necessarily have either. So again, we have sources of income at this point, where it comes from, whether we like it or not, it's still at least a source of income. So those are my thoughts on what we're doing. I think it's much needed. It's something we're obligated to do. We have to put the money somewhere. Yes, it'd be nice if we could just take those millions and put them on the taxes, put them in our budget, but as it's been pointed out, it's not prudent to do something, to use money that it's a one-time, it's like, you get that one-time bonus, you win a little raffle money and you spend it, or, you can't do that. You can't add extra bills to your budget. So, and in terms of the landfill, again, read the contract stuff. Now, it's my understanding from previous is that they accepted the obligation, the whole woods recycling mess and all that. There may be some liability on the underlying of those unlined cells, but the capping of all of it, is part of their, Right, but that's not, you have to look more into the details on that. That's a whole nother discussion. Certainly, you can bring that up, but it's my understanding the entire capping situation and the post-closure is under them. But it's great reading, those 50, 60 pages of the contract. So, thank you.
Any other questions, comments on the agenda item? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Counselor Krasko?
Yes.
Counselor Clemens?
Yes.
Counselor Estrada?
Yes.
Counselor Manna?
Yes.
Counselor Moriarty?
Yes.
Counselor Peloquin?
Yes.
Counselor Steves?
Yeah.
Counselor Vandal?
Yes.
Counselor Vecchia?
No.
8 yes, 1 no.
Motion carries. We are going to take a 5-minute recess. Thank you. All right, so we are back in session. We are moving on to agenda item number 14. Vote that sum of $125,000 shall be appropriated from the landfill royalty receipts reserved account number 6790 as the second payment into the OPEB trust fund for fiscal year 2015.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Manager?
So, as the council is aware, other post-employment benefits is primarily retiree health insurance, and right now that liability stands, I'm told, somewhere in the vicinity of 40+ million that we will have to pay out, but which we have not budgeted. So what the town decided to do some time ago, I guess within the last 2 or 3 years, is to annually set aside some money toward that liability. So this is the next installment, if you will.
Councilor Vecchia?
Could the town manager explain to me what OPEB means?
Yes, other post-employment benefits. So it's anything other than pensions that have to be paid to employees after they retire.
Okay, again, I don't think it should be coming out of landfill account. Okay, thank you.
Councilor Steves?
Yeah, that's one question. I'm assuming that we are paying these things as they go along for people who are currently retired in the budget, right?
Say that again?
I'm assuming that for people who are currently retired or, say, retiring this year, I'm assuming that we would naturally budget for these things on an annual basis.
Well, understand that the amount of money that you pay each year for active retirees is set by PERAC, the state agency that says, here's how much you owe these employees, here's your bill. That's for pensions. For OPEB, which is health insurance, there is no state regulatory agency saying to you, put this much aside. So what happens is, every year, we estimate what the cost is for our current retirees for their health insurance. We split that 50-50. Employee pays half, we pay half. And we budget an amount equal to that.
Yeah.
The unfunded portion of it is if the town government were theoretically to cease today, how much would we have to pay for existing employees who haven't yet retired, but whom we owe this, and employees who are currently retired beginning next year after we haven't appropriated any money through the balance of their life. That's called the unfunded liability. In other words, it's money that we legally owe, but we have not set it aside.
How would we legally be able to pay it if we cease to exist?
How would you what?
How would the town legally be able to legally pay a bill if we cease to exist?
Well,
We wouldn't exist.
Because you're not actually going to cease to exist.
I hope not.
But the point is that you have an obligation that exists today based on the actuarial value of the life of all your retirees. So we annually pay about $8,000 every other year maybe to have a actuarial analysis prepared to tell us how much this liability is. And it just arrived today. I just saw it today. I haven't read it yet. It's about 30 pages. And so what the actuary does is he says, based on the current age of all these retirees, and other characteristics too, gender and whatnot, I project that all these employees will live this long. And based on current retiree health insurance costs, through the balance of their lives, with an escalator, here's how much the town will have to pay out, and we have no money in the bank to pay that. So annually what happens, if you do it on what's called a pay-as-you-go basis, then what that means is annually you're appropriating the money out of current revenue. But that cost is growing so fast as a component of our budget that if we don't start pre-funding the cost, then we will begin in the not-distant future to have to lay people off in order to be able to afford to make the OPEB and the pension payments. So by pre-funding them, you don't get into that situation. And by the way, the bond rating agencies now require us through, I think it's GASB 45, Government Accounting Standards Board, to report the size of the liability to the people who buy our bonds. And if you don't have a funding plan, your bond rating is weakened because of it. If you do have a funding plan, you get a little boost in your bond rating. And to the extent your bond rating is higher, you save money in borrowing costs.
Okay, and also, where is this money actually invested?
What?
Where does this money actually get invested? Where does this money actually get invested?
Karen, do you happen to know the OPEB liability is like 43 million or something?
No, where is the money actually going in terms of, we put it into an account, what's it get
Oh, it
invested
goes in
in?
a trust fund that the treasurer maintains. It's town money, it doesn't go anywhere.
Oh, okay.
Stays here.
Okay.
But you can't get it back out. It takes a council vote to take it back out of the trust fund for anything other than paying OPEB.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Counselor Clements?
Yes.
Counselor Estrada?
Yes.
Counselor Manna?
Yes.
Counselor Moriarty?
Yes.
Counselor Peliquin?
Yes.
Counselor Steves?
Yes.
Counselor Vandal?
Yes.
Counselor Vecchia?
No.
Counselor Crosco?
Yes.
8 yes, 1 no.
Motion carries. Moving on to agenda item number 15, vote to appropriate $50,000 from overlay surplus to reduce the fiscal year 2015 tax levy.
So moved.
Second.
So I think I might finally have a winner here. That'll get unanimous support. This one is to take money out of stabilization to reduce taxation. And this is something you do every year. It's small, but at least it's a step in the right direction.
Any questions or comments? Councilor Vandal?
Could have we taken more out to reduce the tax rate even lower?
No. Will the assessors report to us the amount that's in prior year's overlays that, without getting overly technical, we maintain money each year in something called an overlay against the reality that we're not going to collect 100% of our taxes. So as people redeem those uncollected taxes, money gets freed up from the overlay for that year. The assessors move that money into this account called overlay surplus, and this overlay surplus is available to spend on anything we want to spend it on. Will reports that the amount that's just cleared is about $50,000. There is no more. We're taking 100% of it.
We've taken money out of the landfill royalty receipts. Couldn't we taken more money out of the landfill royalty receipts to lower the taxes?
Yes, you could. Now, unfortunately, here's the effect. If you take money out of the landfill royalties account, or for that matter, overlay surplus, those are non-cyclical, non-replicating amounts of money. It's not money that's necessarily going to be there next year. But if you use it to support the budget, which is going to be there next year, then someday the fiddler's going to have to get paid. So when the landfill closes and that money's not there anymore, you've got a budget that's artificially higher than you can afford, to the tune of, what do we take, I think, $1 million out of free cash every year and $2 million out of landfill royalty in order to support the operating budget, correct? Okay. So think of it in these terms. The current budget that the town has is supported by 2 revenue sources which are going to end someday. We know they're going to end. One of the things that I did in the goals and objectives this year is I said to the council, we've got to start reducing the budget and reduce our reliance on these revenues, which are going to be gone at some time. If you do not, then you will experience what the town of East Bridgewater did about 10 years ago when their landfill closed and the elected officials just refused to accept the reality, didn't have a multi-year plan to cut the budget, and in 1 year they had a disaster. They laid off literally a quarter of the workforce and put themselves to a great extent out of business, and it took them 3 years to recover from that because their landfill closed and the money stopped and they had no plan. So right now we're overly reliant on this money, so Karen and I see it as probably one of the single most important imperatives is to start weaning ourselves off that. Take that money and put it into one-time things, capital expenses, road repair, OPEB, pension liabilities, things that we don't have the money to fund, and stop spending it on salaries and expenses in the budget.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Councilor Steves?
Actually, you sort of half answered the question I was just about to ask. From what Karen said and what these spent, so we'll have about $900,000 left in this account after we make this vote. Could we see an actual plan of what you want to do with the rest of that money? Is there one existing?
We will have something for you later. I won't have anything in the near term, but that will be part of the budget discussion starting in January and February. Yes, we'll have a plan for sure. But that's part of a very big, very complex plan called the budget.
Remind me of the 900,000 we have for this year.
Yeah, I don't want to take it out of context and just tell you, here's what we do with that one little piece, because it's a $56 million budget, so
Right, I get
all
that.
these pieces all contribute to it. I can just tell you that one of the goals is to stop relying on that one-time non-replicating revenue for permanent replicating costs that go on and on. That is a recipe for disaster.
Oh, I'm entirely in favor of that. I argued for that when I kind of liked that, so, yeah.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Counselor Estrada?
Yes.
Counselor Manna?
Yes.
Counselor Moriarty?
Yes.
Counselor Peliquin?
Yes.
Counselor Steves?
Yes.
Counselor Vandal?
Yes.
Counselor Vecchia?
Yes.
Counselor Crosco?
Yes.
Counselor Clements?
Yes.
9 yes.
Motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item number 16, vote to raise and appropriate $200,000 to the stabilization fund to cover anticipated additional costs in the fiscal year 2015 snow and ice budget. This is a two-thirds vote required.
So moved. Second.
Councilor Vecchia.
Through the chairman to the town manager, why is additional expenses anticipated?
You do this, apparently we do this every year. It's a little curious to me. I haven't seen this procedure before, but we appropriate an amount in the budget which we know is inadequate for snow and ice removal. Then we put $200,000 into stabilization to cover that lack of proper funding, and we give to the council the authority to vote to take the money back out of stabilization when we need it to put it into snow and ice removal. So it's really a very cumbersome and odd procedure,
I understand.
but it is the one you use.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions or comments? Councilor Carrasco.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair, to the town manager. I know when the council hired the new P gentleman, he was supposed to kind of develop a plan in regards to making sure we don't hit the $500,000 mark again with our snow budget. Is that still in process? Is there any update? Because transferring this would bring us to the 400,000 mark, and if we do it again, it's going to bring us another over the $500,000, and that needs to be reduced.
Yeah, I can tell the council that review, which is it's a review of our policy to determine what's the policy that's driving the expenditures, that's an ongoing activity that's happening right now. It's not, you have a policy on snow removal, I've just learned. I didn't know that. So we're reviewing that policy to determine if we execute that policy, we spend all that money we spent. So I'm looking at that. Also the plow routes, how many contractors we make, and Don is helping Heather and I do that, to determine are there ways that we can economize and spend less by changing the policy, by changing the plow routes, by changing the mix of employees versus contractors, looking at all that stuff. And of course, this being New England, how much snow you get is the single biggest factor, and we don't control that piece, but the rest of it we're looking at.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Councilor Steves?
Yeah, would it? I don't remember the answer to this question, but I used to know. Would it make sense to actually appropriate the $200,000 directly to snow and ice? Or would that create some sort of a funding issue going forward?
I would personally prefer to budget more adequately for snow and ice removal in the budget and not do this. But you have a very odd law in Massachusetts regarding snow and ice removal that allows you, and you got to help me here because it's a rascal, but it's basically you can only appropriate as much for snow and ice as you actually spent in the prior year plus something. It's a weird law, so it really limits you to what you can put in there. So towns are forced to live with it. And the reason the state did that is because they don't want you putting all sorts of expenses through snow and ice, like new trucks, because they happen to plow snow. That should be over there. So they limit our ability to put money in there. But you got to have some flexibility because of the weather. So this is the way you've dealt with that need for flexibility, by creating a reserve fund in stabilization that you can draw back and use for snow and ice. So, it's a way to do it. There's other ways, but it's a way, and nothing wrong with it. It's fine. The only cumbersome thing is we have to come to you, once we run out of snow and ice money, we have to come to you like every storm and say, we need 20,000 or we need 30,000 out of this 200. And I don't know how that's going to work because that's really cumbersome. So we're going to have to figure that out.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Counselor Manna?
Yes.
Counselor Moriarty?
Yes.
Counselor Peliquin?
Yes.
Counselor Steves?
Yes.
Counselor Vandal?
Yes.
Counselor Vecchia?
Yes.
Counselor Crosco?
Yes.
Counselor Clements?
Yes.
Counselor Estrada?
Yes.
9 yes.
Motion carries. Agenda item number 17, vote to appropriate $67,214 from free cash to the fiscal year 2015 Southbridge School Department budget to reimburse for E-rate funds certified in free cash.
So moved.
Second.
We're giving back money to the school department from E-rate monies. That's a little piece of your phone bill that they've already accumulated, but in order for them to get the money, you have to appropriate it. And if you want any more detail on that, Karen's going to have to help us, because that's the entirety of my knowledge on this.
Any questions or comments? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Counselor Moriarty?
Yes.
Counselor Peliquin?
Yes.
Counselor Steves?
Yeah.
Counselor Vandal?
Yes.
Counselor Vecchia?
Yes.
Counselor Crosco?
Yes.
Counselor Clements?
Yes.
Counselor Estrada?
Yes.
Counselor Manna?
Yes.
9 yes.
Motion carries. Agenda item number 18 is vote to amend the fiscal year 2015 Sewer Enterprise Fund budget by reducing the interest on long-term debt line item from $384,019 to $184,019, a total reduction of $200,000.
So
This
moved.
Just need a second.
Second.
Okay.
This $200,000 is in the budget. We don't need it because we're not anticipating doing any borrowings such that when municipalities borrow, the first interest payment is due 6 months after the anniversary issue date of the bond. Were we to issue a bond after January 1, the interest payment would not be due till after July 1, so this money can be returned, if you will, to the Treasury. The other problem is collections in the sewer fund are not as robust as was projected. So if you don't take this vote and cut this budget, then we would have the potential of having a revenue deficit in the sewer fund by the end of the fiscal year. So we're reducing the budget by $200,000, shedding this part of the appropriation, and hopefully the sewer enterprise fund will balance at the end of the year.
Any questions or comments? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Counselor Peliquin?
Yes.
Counselor Steves?
Yeah.
Counselor Vandal?
Yes.
Counselor Vecchia?
Yes.
Counselor Crosco?
Yes.
Counselor Clements?
Yes.
Counselor Estrada?
Yes.
Counselor Manna?
Yes.
Counselor Moriarty?
Yes.
9 yes.
Motion carries. Agenda item number 19 is vote to authorize the demolition of buildings revolving fund under the provisions of Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 5E3.5, to pay expenses associated with the demolition of buildings within the town of Southbridge and any revenue recaptured to be deposited in the account, with all expenditures approved by the town manager and total expenditures from the account not to exceed $176,000.
So moved.
Second.
So this is not actually spending any money. This is just setting up an account, a revolving account, so that when we receive money for building demolition purposes, which means you appropriate it, it goes into this fund, and in the future, as we demolish a building and we get that money redeemed, because when we demolish a building, typically we put a lien on the real estate, and when somebody buys it or wants to pay the taxes off, they redeem that lien, we get paid that money. Ordinarily, that money just goes into the general fund. If this is set up, then annually, you have to vote to do this every year, the money would come back and go automatically into this fund, and so in the course of a fiscal year, we might be able to reuse the same amount of money 2 or 3 times to take down buildings that are demolished, blighted, et cetera. So Otherwise, the other way to do this, the money would come into the fund, you'd have to vote it back out, the money would come in, you'd vote it back out. So this is transferring some of your authority, if you will, to the town manager so that he can automatically take that money that was originally appropriated for building demolition, and as it gets redeemed, reuse it. But as I say, you have to vote this every single year, and we have to give you an accounting of it every year. Here's how much came in and out of the fund and what we demolished, et cetera, et cetera.
Any questions or comments? Mrs. Harnoy?
Could you just clarify, in the second sentence where it says Mass General Laws, Chapter 44, it should say Section 53E and a half.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Counselor Steves?
Yes.
Counselor Vandal?
Yes.
Counselor Vecchia?
Yes.
Counselor Kraska?
Yes.
Counselor Clements?
Yes.
Counselor Estrada?
Yes.
Counselor Manna?
Yes.
Counselor Moriarty?
Yes.
Counselor Peliquin?
Yes.
9 yes.
Motion carries. Agenda item number 20 is vote to ratify the parking regulations in accordance with the provisions of Chapter 85, Section 2 of the Mass General Laws, that a permit be issued for a no parking zone on the easterly and northerly side of Mill Street, as described in permit number P-00138A.
So moved.
Second.
This is actually something that the Traffic Committee or Parking Committee had recommended some time ago. There was some confusion about who had the authority to pass a parking regulation. My research indicates that it's only the council that can do that. There was a presumption, I think, that the manager could do it. So when I went down and met this business, I think it's Tool and Die. We discussed the fact that the no parking zone in that area doesn't make a lot of sense. We're giving up a lot of parking for no good reason. Did a little research and come to find out that last year this should have been changed, but it never got to you for a vote. So now we're bringing it to you for a vote. It takes about 50, 60 feet, which is currently no parking, and allows it to now have parking.
Any questions, comments? Are we expecting something similar with other changes that have taken place, curiously enough, in some cases?
As things are brought to my attention that need addressing in the traffic rules and regs, my understanding of the way the procedure is, it goes to the committee, police chief, fire chief, a couple of folks. They give you a recommendation. We actually write up the change in the regulation because this is a legal document. That comes to the subcommittee for review, and then to the PPP or PPP, and then from PPP it comes to the council for your consideration.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Counselor Vandal?
Yes.
Counselor Vecchia?
Yes.
Counselor Kraska?
Yes.
Counselor Clements?
Yes.
Counselor Estrada?
Yes.
Counselor Manna?
Yes.
Counselor Moriarty?
Yes.
Counselor Peliquin?
Yes.
Counselor Steves?
Yes.
9 yes.
Motion carries. Agenda item number 21, vote to ratify the policy for the use of the Everbridge activation system, also known as Reverse 911.
So moved.
Second.
This went to the subcommittee, Mr. Chairman, and I was not at the meeting. I can report on it, but perhaps Esteban would like to on that.
Again, the subcommittee did review this. There were just a couple minor changes to the proposal that Chief DeFranzo gave us in regards to adding the emergency management director as an appropriate person to use the system, and also we were removing the Board of Health in regards to that system purpose. We felt that it should be, the police chief, the fire chief, the DPW, and also the emergency management, and also our town manager, which should have access and make that call anyways and inform the public. Also, it was discussed in regards to the use in regards to when it should be used. It's still going to be on a case-by-case basis. It's going to go through, the police chief and the fire chief, or the person that feels it's a necessity, and also reported quickly to the town manager. And ultimately, the town manager makes the final call to what goes out and what doesn't. In regards to some of the questions that were brought up, not to prolong this, is one of the questions that was brought up was, I know in your packet you have an Appendix A in regards to some of the warnings and some of the watches that this system could be used. It is there to cover if the system was ever to be used that way. But primarily the system will be used for emergency only broadcast information, because that was the intent of the purchase, and also any pertinent town information that needs to get out quickly. It is suggested for our citizens to opt in. If you have a house line that has Charter, or it was Verizon at one point, you are in the system, but there is still some glitches. So they're asking our citizens to please sign in, opt in, go on our town website, click, and you will get notifications to what you choose to get notified. So it's important that if you want to get notified for your cell phone, please do it. If you have an elderly, same thing, email, text, you get it all. If you opt in. If you do not opt in, this system will not call cell phones, will not call, send emails. It would just call that number that is locked in through the phone book. If your phone is listed in the phone book, then you are in the system. If it's not, if you're an unlisted number, private number, you need to opt in. So we are encouraging our citizens to please take advantage of it. It's a free service. It's a notification. So if something was to happen, that a mass message needs to get out, this is the way the town has chosen to do it.
Councilor Clements?
Thank you. One other thing, too, is that if you have more than one property, or maybe you have an elderly parent in one area of the town versus where you live, you can put in there, separately, you can put in that area, and it would send you alerts if something were happening in that area, too. So very helpful. I noticed the last storm had quite a few messages. You might get a text, you get an email or voicemail, or lots of different options, but you have to go to the website, as Councilor Carrasco said, in order to opt in. But it certainly was valuable, I guess, in the last storm. A lot of warnings. Probably some of you may not have gotten tickets because you got the warnings about parking and such. So it's very valuable. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Councilor Vecchia?
Yes.
Councilor Carrasco?
Yes.
Councilor Clements?
Yes.
Councilor Estrada?
Yes.
Councilor Manna?
Yes.
Councilor Moriarty?
Yes.
Councilor Peliquin?
Yes.
Councilor Steves?
Yes.
Councilor Vandal?
Yes.
9 yes.
Motion carries. Agenda item number 22, vote to ratify our Common Backyards grant in the amount of $131,600 from the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Manager?
Mr. Chairman, members of the council, as you recall, in the spring of this year, you were presented with a grant called our Common Backyards for approximately this amount of money. It's actually about $113,000. The grant was for a so-called splash pad. The council felt that with water being very expensive, that to establish a recreational facility that had the purpose of essentially wasting water in a very public way was not an appropriate use of the ratepayers' money, and so you rejected that grant. It was then submitted back to the state and went through a couple of changes, but each time it came back is unacceptable. It didn't come back to you, it came back to the Recreation Commission. The problem was that the state was giving these grants to each city, and we qualify as a city because of our charter. So we were one of the recipients. We were also the sole community in the state that refused it. This caused great angst with the bureaucrats on Beacon Hill because towns don't refuse grants. This is unheard of. But I think you very prudently made the decision that you neither wanted to waste the ratepayers' water, nor did you want to construct a new playground that you didn't necessarily need when we don't have the money to maintain all the playgrounds we already have. So you sent that message up. We had several other department heads and I had a lively discussion with the agency that administers this money, Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs, expressed the council's concern, and they essentially said, we will not yield, take the money for the purposes, i.e. a new recreation facility, or don't. And I said, thank you then, we won't. Senator Moore intervened, and Senator Moore was able to convince the state agency to allow us to spend about $50,000 or $60,000 of the money for maintenance, specifically for one of the council's goals, which was brought to you in October, for barrier, handicapped accessibility, barrier elimination issues. And in this case, it's one of the two locations that the commission brought to you. It's the West Street facility. So I think about $56,000, $57,000 of this money will be spent to repair the handicapped accessibility features at that field. The remaining money will be spent to build a new playground. So what Senator Moore and his staff was able to accomplish was a compromise, if you will. We didn't get 100% of the money for repairs to playgrounds, but we got a big chunk of it. So it was a compromise. And I'm very, very pleased. Your staff, the department heads, also contributed to that conclusion. And they added another $20,000 on top of it in order to accomplish what they wanted and still accomplish what we wanted. So my thanks to a number of staff people, but primarily to Senator Moore, whose staff really produced this result, and thanks, of course, to OEA for doing this. So hopefully this is now acceptable to the council. Items 22, 23, and 24 are a series of votes that are required by the state in order to accept and expend these monies.
Any questions or comments? I just wanted to thank both Mr. Pecos and Senator Moore for their work on this. I know that in a couple phone calls I had with the senator or his staff, and in talking numerous times with the manager about it, the state wanted to play hardball or just felt stubborn, as if they had no other option because of all the red tape. But this definitely addresses a lot of ADA non-compliance issues that otherwise would have put us in a bad position, one way or another. Any other questions or comments?
Just a quick observation. As I recall from the subcommittee meeting, this grant is actually a reimbursement grant, isn't it? So we expend the funds and then they reimburse us.
We make what's, for all intents and purposes, an internal loan to ourselves, and then we get it paid back. And hopefully we try to get this done so we get paid back prior to June 30th so that they don't, hold it against our undesignated fund balance or free cash. If they do, it just lags by a year, so either way, we get it in the end.
Right. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Counselor Kraska?
Yes.
Counselor Clements?
Yes.
Counselor Estrada?
Yes.
Counselor Manna?
Yes.
Counselor Moriarty?
Yes.
Counselor Peliquin?
Yes.
Counselor Steves?
Yes.
Counselor Vandal?
Yes.
Counselor Vecchia?
Yes.
9 yes.
Motion carries. Agenda item number 23 is vote to accept the appropriation of 100% of the total Lower West Street Fields and Park project in the amounts of $131,600.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions or comments? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Counselor Clements?
Yes.
Counselor Estrada?
Yes.
Counselor Manna?
Yes.
Counselor Moriarty?
Yes.
Counselor Peliquin?
Yes.
Counselor Steves?
Yes.
Counselor Vandal?
Yes.
Counselor Vecchia?
Yes.
Counselor Kraska?
Yes.
9 yes.
Motion carries. Agenda item number 24, vote to approve sending a statement regarding the dedication of the Lower West Street Fields and Parks for park and recreation purposes according to the wishes of the landowner under Mass General Law, Chapter 45, Section 3.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions, comments, discussion?
Just for
Seeing-
clarification, we're sending this to the Executive Office of Energy Affairs, right? This is going to the EOEA, right?
As required, yes.
It is, okay.
Any other questions? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Counselor Estrada?
Yes.
Counselor Manna?
Yes.
Counselor Moriarty?
Yes.
Counselor Caliquin?
Yes.
Counselor Steves?
Yes.
Counselor Vandal?
Yes.
Counselor Vecchia?
Yes,
Counselor Krasko?
Yes.
Counselor Clements?
Yes.
9 yes.
Motion carries. Moving on to agenda item number 25. We will have Councilors Forum. We'll start with Councilor Vandal.
I just hope that engineers are taking a good look at the sidewalks downtown, because we should have never started this late, all right? Never, never. And if the concrete freezes, it's going to buckle, it's not going to last long at all. And after all the money that we've spent on it, I think it'd be money wasted. So there's chemicals that they have to put in the concrete. I hope somebody's watching it, and then they have to heat these until it kind of cures. Thank you, that's all I have.
Thank you. Councilor Vecchia?
through the chairman to the town manager. 3 weeks ago, at Citizens Forum, a young man named Randy Butler of 93 Easter Road got up and he stated that he had found a dog. He wanted to adopt a dog, filed a complaint with the police in town hall that somebody else got to adopt a dog that wasn't the owner, and he said there was a lot of deception going on. I asked the town manager to look into this, and it's been 3 weeks. I'd like to know what the town manager's findings were.
Apologies to the council. I have a complete report. It's all written. It's all done. I just haven't had the opportunity to get it copied into a PDF file so I can send it to you electronically, but I'll have that done in the next day or two for you.
I'll have it by the end of the week?
Oh, yes. You'll have it and should have it in the next day or two. Yes.
Thank you very much. I'm all done.
Okay. Councilor Steves.
Just one quick thing. I was talking to, excuse me. I'm talking to a resident down who actually lives down the street from me on Lebanon Hill, and she was concerned about some of the areas along the edge of the road that are icing over and causing some concerns about accessibility to some of the driveways down there. I'm not sure how much of that would be related specifically to the Lebanon Hill project that was done a couple of years ago, whether it can be addressed by DPW, but I don't know if Heather or somebody could take a quick look at it and see. She was also concerned about some of the catch basins down there maybe not working properly. So,
And where is that again?
on the steep side, on a steep slope of the second Lebanon Hill.
On the steep slope of the...
Of Lebanon Hill Road.
Okay.
Going down toward in the area around Tepton Rock and farther north of that.
Okay.
If you go up there and while it's still frozen, you can see the flow frozen on some people's driveways and crossing Tipton Rock Road. So.
All set? That's it for the line. Okay. Councilor Pelican?
I'd just like to thank the manager for everything that you did to help get the sidewalk down by East Main Street finished before the winter. That's something we've been waiting for a long time, and I'm really happy to hear that it's done. So thank you.
Excellent. Councilor Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. First, this is to the town manager. I'm going to the MMA, so if you would put me down as going to that luncheon. He told us to let you know. Did you forget?
She's going to your MIA annual business meeting and luncheon. She would like to attend.
Gotcha.
He said we
So
could
you have a
say it
lunch
during
day.
this time.
It's a
And
little non
second,
sequitur. I missed it.
And second, we do have a new governor, Governor-elect Baker, and I recall at the last January MMA meeting, he got up there at a debate and he said one of the first things he was going to do as governor, before he even sat down in that chair, was sign those papers to release that $1 million in Chapter 90 money that Governor Patrick was holding back if it wasn't done before he got into office. So I would like to hold Governor-elect Baker to his word and draft up a letter from the town council, if we all want to sign this, and send it up to Governor-elect Baker just to remind him that he made that promise to us. That's money that we could use desperately. It's to all the towns, but we get we still have a portion of it coming to us. I just wish, I hope everybody had a nice Thanksgiving, and I hope everybody's staying warm. Oh, and there is one more thing. Going down 131 towards Big Bunny, it's past the liquor store, and it's on the left-hand side of the road. There's poor drainage there, and Councilor Steves was talking about the icing. There is tremendous amount of ice on the sidewalk there, and someone is going to fall and break their necks. So if there's anything that could be done about that, and it seems to happen every year, but this year, I haven't seen it like this in November. I mean, it's really bad. So if you could check into that, and that's it. Stay warm, everyone.
Thank you. Councilor Estrada?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, Mr. Peggy, thanks for attending my complaint, the low budget in the social service. Thank you for increase the budget, the social service. Only for record, I vote no in the item 9, 10, 11. Personal opinion. Friday, check my packets, read the agenda, the item 9, 10, 11. My first feeling, oh my God, more taxes. I'm talk the weekend. I talk to my family, my friend, my neighbors. Why the problem? The family for sale the house. Check big sample my street, the present street. Now, a house in the front, big sign for sales. The big complaint. No for transfer for better job in other city, no for transfer for back home, not like the weather, no. The big complaint, pay the taxes too much. Thank you.
Councilor Clements?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we did get through Thanksgiving, and then we had the annual tree lighting, which went over very well. We were concerned with the sidewalks, but it seemed like people persevered and came out. And I just want to say a few kudos to those who gave up their time that evening to make sure that many citizens, there were hundreds out there, and it was a great turnout. First up, we had the people who helped with the procession for Santa to come down. Bill Belanger and his train was there, and Helen Lenti, a shout out to you for organizing, getting together the carolers from St. John Paul the Parish, John Paul II Parish. We didn't think you were going to be there this year because the choral director couldn't make it, but lo and behold, one of your members showed up early with some wonderful music to hand out to the citizens, and then you showed up, and it was wonderful. You led the community in caroling songs while they waited for Santa, so it was a great thing. And then we moved on down to the Common, accompanied by the fire department. It was a great showing. We appreciate the effort made by the fire department to come out with lots of trucks and firemen, and the auxiliary police kept it all running smoothly. There were no incidences with traffic, and it was wonderful. Everybody got down to the Common to enjoy the time there. And speaking of that, the Conference Center, and Kim Cameron, big kudos to you for once again donating the cookies and the cocoa, and your event staff for making it all happen. Sunday after Thanksgiving is difficult, and we really appreciate the effort you put forth when Roger and Estelle came and picked up that cocoa and the cookies. As usual, Judy Ferguson and her husband Ron were out for the evening taking pictures of all the people waiting in line to see Santa. Thank you, Santa, for spending all those hours with us on the Common. And many people helped to make this happen. But certainly, while the event was a one-time evening thing, the real miracle, the real vision out there is what went on prior and what is still out there for all of us. And we need to thank Rudy and his family for allowing us to take over. His family allowed us to take over his space and to continue his vision. We thank Rudy for those wonderful new car displays that he was working on prior to passing away. And we mostly thank Dick Cowett and his sidekick Mike for finishing Rudy's holiday vision for this year. It was a great undertaking, and they executed it fabulously. Now, Rudy's spirit lived on in many other ways, and if you've had a chance to get down to the Common in the evening, what you will notice is some wonderful new lights. There are 3 new trees lit, which make a total of 4 right now. And a few weeks ago, we voted to accept a donation from an anonymous donor with the intent that it went to new lights on the Common. And since then, the lights were purchased, and luckily we got 3 trees up. We were a little short notice, and as I mentioned before, over the last few weekends, the tree lighting, so to speak, was spearheaded by former Fire Chief Lenny Laporte, with help from a number of dedicated firemen who came out on very cold mornings and got a few of the trees done. And then the next weekend, once again, we were able to use a bucket truck from Dennis Benoit Landscaping and his workers, and we couldn't have gotten those other 2 trees done. Now, what's really great about all this is we still have more lights to put up. We just were in a time constraint, and so you will be seeing more of that. This donation was wonderful. It was in Rudy's memory, given to the people of this community, because his vision was to have a better-looking holiday season out there on the Common. And I thank that donor. Don't know who you are, but on behalf of the community and the happy people that we saw that evening, and anytime people drive by, I know when I drive around that rotary at night, it's wonderful, and thank you so much, and thank you for everybody for making that possible to get up that evening. So a few other thank yous just go out to, we had some great entertainment. The Act Two Ministries choral group came out again from Connecticut and sang for us, and they did a wonderful job. If you've not ever attended, come on out next year, because they do a fantastic job. And this year, we also had a special, another DJ, a special donation from Ace Luz and his partner Frank. They did voice, Ace sang for us, and kept the holiday tunes going when the carolers were finished. So, you know, it really was a great evening, something that this town can be proud of. Oh, Cable Access came out and videoed, so for those of you who didn't make it, take a look. It might inspire you to come out next year and participate. The spirit continues. Rudy's spirit continues, it goes on, and we really appreciate everyone who is involved, and just a special shout out and thank you to my family who was there that evening, driving trucks and taking care of things. Who couldn't have done it. I couldn't have done it without you, Councilor Manna. And we also, yes, we had a number of people participate in the procession, the Girl Scouts, Trinity, a bunch of people. Anybody who's ever done it has had a great time, and hopefully next year you'll be inspired to participate. So again, thank you to the De Gregorio family for allowing us to continue with Rudy's projects, and all who helped. It really is the true spirit of Christmas, the holiday season, whether you believe in Christmas or Hanukkah or something else. Just that wonderful community spirit. It's alive and well here in Southbridge. We have a lot to be grateful for. And if you don't believe it, go down to the Common and take a look at those energy-efficient lights. By the way, I didn't mention that, but they are saving the community a lot of money. Each bulb in the old lights that are still up there are 25 watts. The new lights, you can do a whole tree for 11 watts. A whole tree. So take that, and you know, we thank that donor not only for keeping the vision alive, but saving the town some money too. So thank you very much, and as you move forward to your Christmas season, I hope it's going well for you. Thanks.
Councilor Carrasco?
Yes, I just quickly, I have a question for Councilor Vecchia. I know he had mentioned earlier in regards to when he was EHS chairman, how much money did you save the school or get to the school?
That year, through Senator Moore, Mark Karen, and I helped a little bit, we got $1.9 million in Chapter 70 money. And because we got it, the taxpayers that year didn't have to spend any money for the schools. That money took care of everything.
1.9
million.
Thank you. Okay. With that, I just, one of the things that came to my attention that is very troubling, it has come to my attention, and I will be bringing this concern up tomorrow at the school committee meeting also. Again, I've always said, since I've gotten here, we have to hold people accountable, we have to unify our town, and we have to raise our level of respect. And I'm going to hold true to that. And it has come to my attention that our current superintendent has decided to close the administration staff building from December 24th through January 5th and give all those employees time off with pay that is not included in their holidays, which would be a total of 5.5 days paid extra vacation coming out of our town budget or their school budget that the town approved. I don't understand how that can be done. I'm troubled. We can't do it here on the town side. You can't shut down the town hall for 5.5 days. How can they shut down a school district that is in need of services for 5.5 days? I'm looking for an explanation. I have reached out to school committee members. I'm bothered. So, there's certain things that are alarming. From May to December, the paper that we've looked at, school choice budget increased $4,000, which is a lot less than what is expected, but it's still an increase. So that tells me kids are still leaving. On top of that, we hire an assistant superintendent at the range of $90,000. So we keep adding, and I feel that our students are not getting the benefits. I mean, I'm sorry, I volunteer at an after-school program. These kids are not even allowed a book. So I'm troubled. I am very troubled, and I will be bringing this concern up tomorrow night at the school committee because I need an explanation. How can you shut down the administration building for 5.5 days and pay these people vacation days? So that is something that I will address tomorrow, not as a counselor, but as a citizen. Thank you, Mr. Pecos, for not shutting down the town hall from December 24th through January 5th. Not saying that our employees don't deserve it, but at the same time, I think we need to be wise stewards of the finances that are given to us. And I think we have to hold people accountable. And if we continue to sleep on the school side, I agree that Councilor Clements said we have to look at their budget. Yes, we do, but unfortunately, we don't have a whole bunch of jurisdiction to look at their budget. And I know last year we tried, and I was very vocal in regards to giving the students more money. Unfortunately, I don't see it happening. I see it more administration. We have assistants to assistants to assistants to assistants. Something needs to be done. I'm anxious to hear this investigation report also, because we need to move our town forward with a new one or with the current. I don't know. I haven't heard the reports. I'm interested, but we need to start moving our town forward, and both our school committee and our town council, we need to hold each other accountable. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To you, Councilor Carrasco, you're telling me that they're getting an extra 5.5 days off with pay on top of what they already have for vacation. So it's not coming out of vacation time, or even if they have vacation time left, it's not coming out of sick time, it's not coming out of personal time. It's 5.5 days extra for each administrator?
Anybody that works in the school administration building.
Including the teachers?
No, the teachers get their, teachers are salaried.
Okay.
This is employees, clerks,
So this
secretaries.
is janitors, this is your...
Janitors are
No?
union contractor.
Okay, so
I'm
then
talking about clerks,
we're talking about the
secretaries,
office administration.
Central office.
The central office administration.
Correct.
Okay. And you said that's over $500,000?
No, they're getting 5.5 days.
Okay. Did you add up
I
the...
did not,
oh,
because they all vary in salaries, so that's
Thank you.
when this information came to me, I wasn't going to sit there and total. I'm not, again, I want to make this known that it's not right.
I would like to personally thank you for bringing that to the public's attention.
I would, basically, it's not, I would call it a superintendent vacation. because
Well, I would
she has
go-
authorized that
Correct, but
vacation.
if you didn't bring this up tonight, the public wouldn't know about it. And I thank you for bringing this to the public's attention.
And again, this is not against the students. This is not against our teachers. This is about not holding people accountable and taking funds that were presented or thought to be used for students and being used in another way. Again, I don't know how they're going about it. I don't know how they're going to get away with it. I know our town manager, when I found out, I know Mr. Pecos reached out to the superintendent, and she said this is what she's doing. So it is what it is, but I just want to make sure that the public knows. Again, I'm for the students. I have a son that's in the school system. It's not, and those teachers work hard. I'm impressed. I have met every single principal that works for the district, and I am highly, highly impressed with each and every one of the five principals, or excuse me, the four principals that are in our district. They're great people. Unfortunately, I guess the administration is making decisions that they feel are necessary. But with that being said, I just want to let our council, our town people know, and also that I will be tomorrow at that meeting.
I do have one more question. I'm sorry, Counselor Carrasco. I don't know who this would be towards, though. So who approves this? Who approves the superintendent approving this? Who approves that?
The superintendent does.
The superintendent does.
So
It's for the budget.
the school committee has no say over this. The superintendent just has full control of giving 5.5 days off to the entire administration, the office.
To my understanding, like we heard today,
Spending our money
it-
like this, right out the window.
my understanding, if I can translate what was said earlier today, on our town side, when there's money allocated in a budget, once that money's there, the administration, the department heads, and also the administrators can take that money and move it around and do as they wish.
You might think it would go towards the students.
The education reform law gives the school autonomy. Once their budget is set, we don't control anything.
I totally get that. I do understand that. But you might think that they would take that money, or that 5.5 days, if they have that extra money, and put it towards the students.
Again, I don't want to make that assumption. All I know is the information that was given to me, and I will bring that forward. Unfortunately, my job as a counselor is to hold people accountable. I can't hold the superintendent accountable because she's not under our jurisdiction or anything like that. But I can urge and plead to my fellow government officials on the school committee to either hold her accountable or check into the matter so things can be done correctly. Because 5.5 days, that's a generous boss.
Well, they should be held accountable because that is the town money, like you stated earlier. We do appropriate that money to the school committee for the school district. So it is the town's money essentially. And when money's being spent unwisely or badly, or however it's being spent, I believe that we're responsible to try to help rectify the matter.
I agree, but again, I'm not going to go into telling someone how and not what to do, but again, I think the public needs to know if this is an approved vacation that she has submitted, then she shall give an explanation, at least to the public, on how she can or how they can give 5.5 days extra on top of what they got.
If I were the parents, I would be up in arms, so, thank you.
She's asking questions, it's not my fault.
Thank you again, Councilor Carrasco, for bringing that to our attention. I appreciate that.
You're welcome. I'm getting looked at, Councilor
What's 5 more minutes?
Councilor Vecchia has left the building. I had another question for him, but he has left the building. The last thing that I want to...
Must mean the meeting's over.
The last thing that I want to say is I want to thank the numerous volunteers that helped for the Thanksgiving Day meal on Thanksgiving morning. We had numerous volunteers. I want to thank the YMCA. I know the newspaper said it was the YMCA that hosted it, but it was a private organization, House of Destiny Ministries, that provided the meal. But the YMCA hosted the meal and actually paid a staff to be there while we were there. We were able to serve over 100 meals. We touched different areas. We had 4 different teams that did deliveries. We delivered all the way to Heritage Green this year. We had people call in from there. It was an awesome time. And again, I just want to thank all those that served, donated, cooked, delivered, again, to the YMCA for that awesome time that we were able to have for the community. And it was a pleasure to be able to participate and see that come to pass. And to my fellow partners in crime here that participated in the big old turkey bowl, thank you. It is very interesting, after being so many years away from competitive sports, that when you have the Bartlett Indians across the field taunting and trying to use their star player, the competitive nature comes right back. So I apologize if when you do see the video, you saw competitive nature from me, but yes, I take pride in Southbridge. I love to be here. This is my community, and I guarantee to win, and I brought home a win. There was several people that were kind of, it's okay. I won't say anything about your arm, your 2 interceptions. I won't say anything about that, but we had fun. And again, just if you're talking to the town manager, make sure he's not looking at any lights. But we had a lot of fun, and you know what? Tonight's been an interesting night. It's 10:40, and that's all I got.
Motion. All set, Counselor?
All set.
Thank you. Agenda item number 26, discussion of next meeting dates.
Monday, December 15th at 7 p.m. in council chambers.
And agenda item number 27
So moved.
is adjournment. All in favor?
Yes.
Thank you. We are adjourned.